Hello and welcome back to the Go Cave podcast. Before we get started today, I have something I'm very excited to tell you guys about. So, recently, I have been spending a lot of time trying to come up with new shirt designs because I know everybody really wanted to try and get something last time and we sold out so quickly. I'm really excited to announce that we have 4 brand new t-shirt designs in the web store and they're releasing today, March 3rd. And yeah, try and get them as fast as you can, guys. It would be great if you guys could support the show. If you're a listener of this show and you want to support, this is the best way. And I gotta be honest, man, I'm pretty excited about these new designs. Here they are on screen right now for you. And yeah, if you guys want to check them out, the links will be in the description of this show. They are $25 Canadian each plus shipping. Yeah, I'm really excited to be working with these guys. And unfortunately, if you guys are in the UK right now, they aren't shipping to the UK. However, if you really, really, really want a shirt, just DM me and we'll try and figure something out. The shipping cost that the company had set up was just outrageous to the UK. They wanted pretty much the cost of the shirt. And I just didn't think that that would be acceptable. I want to make sure that you guys aren't overpaying for something. But yeah, I'm really excited to be bringing these to you guys. And yeah, man, here's one of the designs right here. I love it. It's great. If you guys want to support the show, the best way is to buy some merch. So anybody that does, thank you so much. Now, let's jump into today's episode. So, today's guest has played a huge role in creating a community for the older riders. Not only that, but he has played a big part in some of the biggest brands in BMX, such as G Sport. After years of contests and video parts, he would eventually take an ACL injury that would force him to step back from riding for a while. Unfortunately, that wouldn't be the only hardship he faced. In his late 30s, he was diagnosed with cancer. And after winning the battle, he knew he needed to get back on his bike. Since he started riding again, Neil Waddington has put out a new video part, hosted jams, and started the Ride On Facebook group, a place for older riders to get stoked, with over 7,000 members. It's awesome to finally be sitting down and speaking with you, Neil. How are you, man?
I'm good, thank you, Cam. You?
Wonderful. Yeah, it's 3:00 here today, and I got a beer cracked, so we're good to go.
Yeah, you started early.
Definitely.
Not a beer festival. You've got a good beer festival in Kitchener, haven't you?
We do, actually. Yeah, we do the beer fest. I'm surprised that you know about that.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome. Dude, that's wicked. So, yeah, you're a listener of the show. You would know how this starts. We typically go back to when you first started riding. So, yeah, let us know, where did it all start?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I was sort of towards the mid to back end of what people call the old school, the sort of first wave of riders. It really kind of blew up in the UK, I guess, 83, 84. BMX was huge around that time in the UK. I was desperate for a BMX around that time. I really wanted to get into it. So I kind of begged my parents, can I get a BMX for Christmas? But I was growing up in a kind of a more of a traditional industrial kind of part of the UK. And my folks were quite traditional as well. And they sort of said, no, this is just a fad. Nobody wants one of these bikes. You want to get yourself a 10-speed racer. So, rather than getting a rally burner for Christmas, I ended up with a 10-speed road bike, which was obviously not what I wanted. So went along with that for a couple of years. And then 86, my folks split up and I moved to a brand new area. So I was kind of living away from all the friends that I'd kind of grown up with. And I was only 13, so it's kind of a weird time to be moving away from everybody So I had to kind of make new friends. So I was down in a local village, one evening trying to find some friends, I guess. And some guy just rides into the sort of car park where I was near on a BMX, rolls up a little sort of banking that was near there, rolls back, does the most perfect 180 out, and that was it. I just, straight away, I just thought, I've got to find out who this guy is. If I'm going to make some friends, then this guy is going to be the top of my list. So I ended up making, new friends, met this guy, and turns out he was a racer at the time. He was racing, did a little bit of freestyle as well, but he just upgraded his bike. He just upgraded to I can't remember what it might be, a GT Pro Series. This was around sort of, as I say, early 86, I guess. and he had an old bike, an old race bike. So he said, you can buy it if you want. So that was it. I, as quick as I could, ran back home, said, Mom, I want to buy a BMX. And I think at the time she might have felt a bit sorry for me because we were, living in a new neighborhood and I didn't really know anybody. I think she was keen for me to kind of make some friends. So she said, yeah, what do you need? And, it wasn't that expensive. So I ended up buying this second-hand Mongoose Super Goose 3. And that was the first bike I had. I started racing, joined a race club nearby, and that was it. I was kind of off and going to regionals and club meetings and nationals and stuff like that, really.
Dude, that's awesome. And something that I've kind of noticed as a trend with a lot of the older guys that I've interviewed is the fact that, like, they got into racing first, right? Like, obviously racing was a really big thing back when, obviously you started, right? Like, freestyle was still kind of being, born at this point. There really wasn't too many people doing it,
Yeah, definitely. Particularly near me. I mean, there was, the race track that I became a member of was in Sheffield. So it was about, 20 miles from the town that I lived in. And, you'd go on a Wednesday night. So it's just a regular Wednesday evening club meet. And there'd be, motos and semis for most of the classes. There were loads of people turning up. So it was definitely something that you could get into and you could meet other riders. And I was 13 at this point. So, always a packed age group at race meets, 13s, 14s. But yeah, I mean, I raced for a couple of years and I still love racing now. I like going to race meets and stuff like that. The problem is that I was terrible at racing. I was a kind of a really skinny, scrawny kid. I had no real aggression about me or anything like that. No kind of, none of that kind of killer instinct that you need to be a decent racer. And I sucked at it. I enjoyed going, but I sucked at it. So, in between the motos and in between the races, I would kind of practice doing track stands and, boomerangs, and I'd kind of try and hit the dirt jumps and learn to jump. And I kind of just started to, it became more about that than it did about the racing. So in the end, I was more interested in, learning the tricks and learning jumps than I was about racing, which is just as well, because as I say, I sucked at racing. I really did. So I guess after a couple of years of racing, there was a guy who kind of raced at one of our regionals called Rob Denman, a really good racer, really fast. And he was the first guy I ever saw doing real tricks, doing sort of real jumps. So, toboggans, and he could do step throughs, really, turn downs, really cool stuff like that. And that was it. After that, I just thought, that's kind of what I really want to do. I want to kind of get more into freestyle. So I think I ended up trading in or swapping it for a really early first-gen Harrow freestyler. So one of the really sort of, early ones, the white ones. It was a second-hand one, so it seen a bit of action. But and it had mags on it, so it weighed a ton. You couldn't get it off the ground. But, it just it was just a convenient switch to make, and it just seemed to make sense to me. I was kind of spending my time practicing tricks, not practicing gate starts or practicing, berms or stuff like that. So, that was it. It was probably late 87, I guess, something like that, maybe early 88. I will have been about 15, something like that. So I started to really, get into freestyle then, really, as it was called then. I guess we don't really call it freestyle anymore, but, just kind of doing tricks on a bike, really.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, it was 89 when Hoffman pulled the first 900, which is actually in Kitchener where I live. So, freestyle, I think freestyle really started to take off kind of after that, at least for most dudes. And obviously for yourself, you started to get into it right before then, but I could only imagine, you must have seen Hoffman doing it, doing the 900, at your age at some point, right? Or at least heard about it.
Yeah. I mean, it was a weird time to kind of, I kind of got into BMX. So as I say, this was sort of 88 then, really. And it was pretty much as BMX died, really. That first wave kind of just bombed, I mean, Hoffman was still riding, obviously. He was kind of, pushing it as far as he possibly could. So you'd see these things in the magazines, but there was nobody to ride with. There was nowhere to ride. And it was just, it was just bombing. Bike sales were sort of going downhill. There wasn't really any magazines around at that time either. Organized contests had kind of finished, or they had pretty much just finished by about 1990. So it was hard, as I say, I kind of got into freestyle probably at the wrong time. It was on its way out as far as the general public were concerned anyway. And, in terms of popularity, it was on a downward kind of trend, really. But, you did eventually find other riders, a weird thing would have been at one point when I did, after a couple of years from there, once I kind of got a driving license and I could, get a car and go around and try and find other people, you would meet other riders. And I would probably say that probably in the early 90s, you were aware of pretty much, in the UK, you were aware of pretty much every other rider in the country because the sport had got that small. You kind of knew, you knew if there were riders in this town or in this city, and you might not know them all, or you might not know them, as great friends, but you certainly be aware of who's where and, where people are. So it just kind of showed you really how small it had got, really.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, with the power of the internet, that's changed quite a bit. Obviously, with your group and whatnot, which we'll jump into later, but just the fact that you can really meet with these people is so much easier, right? And I feel like back then, how many of those dudes still ride, do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I mean, obviously, finding the riders now with the internet is a different ballgame. But I would probably say that, when I was, let's say, 17, if we were on a family holiday and we were in the car and, if we're driving through somewhere and we spotted another freestyler, a BMXer, at the side of the road, I would tell my mum to stop the car. We'd get out and I'd talk to them and, you'd become friends just because there was there probably wasn't a crew in their town. There certainly wasn't a crew in my town. So you were riding on your own at that point, late 80s, early 90s. Most people I knew rode with skaters. So you'd kind of hang out with the local crew of skaters, and there might be one rider or two riders, but certainly not a scene by any stretch,
Yeah, definitely. It's funny to see how far things have come since then, right? Like nowadays, it's really odd to see BMX riders kind of hanging out with skaters and like really being with them, right? Like, and even then I feel like it's got to be pretty interesting to be riding with skaters if you're a BMX rider, because I think a lot of that like hate towards BMX started to originate kind of around then, I would assume. But
I don't know if that's because I hear quite a lot about that, and I don't know if either I don't encounter it these days, or if it's maybe I hear a lot of it from the US where they've got sort of separate parks where, you've got skate-only parks, and we don't really get that much of it in the UK, if I'm honest, in terms of sort of separate parks. And I think that's possibly because we did, the crews were very tight. I used to love riding with skaters. They were a good bunch to ride with, and you were just part of their crew, really. And I think, even the sort of some of the early magazines that we had in the early 90s, like we had a magazine called Rad, which originally was a BMX-only magazine. And, when BMX declined, it sort of said, okay, we're going to go half BMX, half skating. And then as BMX declined further, it said, okay, it's now 3/4 skating and 1/4 BMX. And eventually it was like one page BMX and the entire magazine was skating. But because we had that magazine where those two kind of cultures kind of, coexisted, I think it kind of helped foster a kind of like a mutual appreciation. And I think that still exists today in the UK, I would say. I don't know if it's just unique to the UK scene, but it's certainly there's not that much hostility, I don't think, between skaters and riders, as particularly when you hear stories about the US, the States. I think there's probably a lot more there.
Yeah, I kind of wonder what that is, right? Because in Canada, we don't really get too much of that, but like ever so often, right? Like I've encountered it numerous times, but when it comes to like, in the States, I feel like it's everywhere, I might just be wrong about this, but yeah, I just feel like it's in most places in the States, Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, one of the things that's happened in the last sort of decade or so is, concrete parks have started to be built everywhere. And I think skaters can get a little bit kind of precious about pool coping and things like that, and not wanting metal pegs on them and things like that. So I don't know if that's fed into it. But
before then, most of the skate parks that I've sort of rode for over the years, it's always been sort of that coexistence. I mean, to add into that, we had to, in the 90s, we had a huge, aggressive inline skate boom, which I think, was worldwide. So those guys were factored into the skate park mix. And then, today we've got the scooters to deal with. And, so I think there's always going to be these different groups in the parks, and, they have to coexist. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, definitely. I fully agree with you on that. Anyways, let's get into some of the early years of your riding. Let's get into kind of the 90s, because some of the stuff that you were doing in the 90s was really rad, man. Like, I checked out some of your video parts and they were really, really good, man. I actually got really stoked. I wish I would have watched them the other day when I went out riding beforehand, because I totally would have been trying new stuff. But yeah, anyways.
Thanks,
yeah, so let's kind of, go through the era here. So at the beginning of the 90s, kind of what were you up to?
Well, I mean, that's around the sort of time period when there was very little going on in the BMX world. Most of the magazines had kind of folded or had sort of dwindled away. Some of them were even sort of, only publishing every 2 months, going bi-monthly. So there wasn't a lot really going on. Trying to find other riders was pretty difficult as well. And also trying to find somewhere to ride was another interesting one, because the skate parks of the 70s skate boom had kind of been torn down. During the sort of the early boom of the 80s for BMX, they didn't really build a lot of purpose parks around that sort of time. So there just was a real lack of places to ride. I mean, everybody was riding street, really. Trails had not really become a big deal. People were very much riding street at that time. So, you'd kind of, you'd find spots in towns, or you'd hear about ledges, you'd hear about banks, you'd go and travel to them. But I mean, again, early 90s, I was still quite a young guy. I was only sort of 17. So, I didn't go that far afield initially. Until I kind of got driving, once I learned to drive and I got a car, then that was it. We could go and try and find, spots. And I'd met another rider by that point. There were sort of two of us, and we were there was a rider in a town about sort of 10 miles away from me. So we'd kind of travel around and eventually ventured out to like the big city of Sheffield, which was kind of like a big deal to go out into the cities, because we were just riding small towns and, small town car parks and place spots like that. But yeah, there was not a lot going on. It was, contest wise, I mean, I think in the very early 90s, the sort of official BFA, which was the sort of British Freestyle Association, in the sort of through the 80s, they'd pretty much run the comp scene in the UK, but they were sort of dwindling. There wasn't really stuff around. The King of Concrete contest at Salsia just really started to gain a little bit of momentum. So I remember in 1990, we went down to that, and that was a kind of a big deal, because pretty much everybody from the UK was there. And it wasn't a full skate park by any means, but, pretty much most people who rode were at that event. So, you'd start to connect then, and you'd kind of meet this person from that town, and he knows this guy. And, eventually you kind of found that you knew most of the riders, as I said before, most people from different towns who rode. So you can travel around the country and go to various spots. But as I say, the skate park wise, it was pretty poor. There was nothing. You might find a metal. There was a company called Rare Unit in the UK. They used to make really terrible midis and mini ramps for sort of local councils. So the local borough would want to put, let's say, they might suddenly decide they're going to put a skate ramp. I mean, not a park, but just a midi or a mini ramp in their local kind of park or whatever. So they get this company to build it really, really badly. They build it out of metal, make sure it was really slippy and dangerous. But that's all it was. So you might travel an hour in the evening to go and ride a really, really poor, 8-foot slippy midi or something like that. As I say, finding spots to ride was the hardest part around that sort of time.
Yeah, I could believe it, man. It definitely seems that parks really started to pop up kind of after the 90s or like mid 90s, right? Now, I know in the 90s you actually met and became good friends with G Sport George. So how did that happen? And, what's he like? I don't know if many people would know who he is at this point. Obviously, anybody that's really hardcore in BMX knows about G Sport George, but.
Well, I mean, as I say, we started to venture out to the big cities of the north. So that was a city called Sheffield, basically. There was this big sort of university city, loads of architecture there. So, for a rider, particularly if you ride in the street, really good place to go. So we were kind of visiting these cities and riding spots, looking for different places to ride there. And we just kind of bumped into another rider, this guy with a crazy kind of afro hair, really heavy on his bike, just a really, a kind of odd guy, we thought at first, but he was another rider. So, because there were so few of us, we kind of instantly bonded. He was very different. He was coming at BMX from a very different angle to what we were, I think, then. He was kind of really thinking about the bikes even then. I think he rode a little bit of mountain bike before he did, before he came to BMX. But we became friends essentially. And from that small sort of nucleus, a kind of scene started to grow in Sheffield, which kind of I guess I became part of. I was from a town, let's say 10 miles away, but I would spend all my time now from then on in Sheffield. We would build dirt jumps. We would build, we'd go out in the middle of the night. If let's say there was a line we wanted to get, wall ride or something like that, but there was like a horrible curb or a ledge or just something weird in the way, we'd go out in the middle of the night and concrete it over, and then come back next couple of days or whatever, and we had a smooth lip. So yeah, I mean that kind of started to grow what became the Sheffield scene, really. That we then met a flatlander. We met a dirt jumper who, weirdly enough, I'd kind of raced with during my kind of early racing days. And I mean, just to show you how quick things changed, the racetrack that I mentioned earlier on, where I joined the club, by the time we're into like early 90s, let's say maybe 91, it had been abandoned. The whole racetrack had been abandoned. The club wasn't racing anymore. So BMX racing had really tanked as well. So we got in touch with the club secretary and said, what's happening with the racetrack? You're not using it anymore. And he said, no. So they said, well, can we look after it and build our own, can we use it for BMX, but build jumps on it? So I said, yeah. So that was it. We kind of had a track where we started to build, not really what you call trails, but more just, huge kind of takeoff jumps with a bit of a sketchy landing. There wasn't really, we'd not really seen anything such as trails at that point. I don't think really it started to happen. I think the first time I saw trails was sort of Taj in a Hoffman video, I think. And they were quite small ones, so it wasn't really, the idea wasn't in our heads to build a set of trails. It was literally, let's just build a massive lip, massive jump, and just hit it as fast as we can. So yeah, so we're, that scene grew to, I don't know, quite a lot of riders, over the early 90s. We started off with just 3 of us. And I would say within a few years, there was kind of a dozen riders suddenly. So BMX was just starting to get a bit of a foothold again, I think. 91, 92, it was starting to gain a bit of momentum. The problem we had was that the bikes were still terrible. We couldn't really get good bikes. The company still making BMX, I guess, around that sort of time were, they had a hangover from the 80s, basically. They weren't investing, put it that way, in frames and geometry and materials. So, you'd buy a bike and you'd break it really, really quick because riding had moved on. Riding had really progressed. While essentially it had died as a sport, the riding had just gone, you were speaking about Hoffman's 900 and, all sorts were happening and people were sort of seeing things in magazines and, you're getting influenced by it. So it certainly the riding had gone like that. The popularity had gone like that. And the bikes had just stayed level. They'd just not moved on at all. So, yeah, we were breaking stuff a lot. And you'd go to, you might go to a contest, let's say early 90s, 92, 93, and everybody would have some part of their bike welded up. Or they'd have some kind of weird modification, like, pegs welded here, or, just weird bits of metal welded to their bikes just to keep them riding, basically, keep the bikes rolling. I think, the rider run, rider own thing was just starting to happen. I think we'd started to see standards and we'd start to see S&M, but I think the pound was pretty weak against the dollar because they were hellishly expensive. For back then, I seem to remember they were about £500 sterling for a frame, for a standard frame around that sort of time. And work out what that is now for inflation, and it's an eye-watering amount of money. So few people could have kind of afford the first gens of these sort of rider-owned companies, particularly in the UK. So people were just welding up their old, shitty Harrows or GTs or whatever, or stuff like that, just to keep them on the road, really. And I think that was where, George started thinking about whether or not he could make something that would help us, basically, that would improve things.
Yeah, definitely. And it's wild to see kind of how far G Sport has come since those early days, right? Like it's pretty awesome, like really good for him, man. And it's cool to see a company that like is essentially just so innovative, right? And what I find so funny is that like with G Sport, and George being kind of coming from mountain biking, I wonder if the guys at We the People are kind of also coming from mountain biking in a way, because those dudes are always trying to innovate as well, right? Like there was a few years ago, they were trying to test out a new, basically a tapered like headset, right? So that the top cup would be smaller and the bottom one would be bigger. And that is a huge thing in downhill riding. That's like a normal thing on a downhill bike. I don't know if they ever released that, but I do know that they were working on that. They're always like innovating to make these things stronger. And I can tell that they take a lot of it from mountain biking, but I don't know. I feel like I wouldn't have seen that come in with G Sport, but yeah, their stuff is always so innovative as well, right? Like some of the best rims in the game.
I mean, I think originally it started out as, I think probably today the companies can, they innovate because they know there's a good market there. BMX is big now. If they get a product out to market that's innovative and it does something better than the previous product did, or it does something in a different way and people want it, then the units, they're going to sell a lot of units, let's face it. Whereas I think in the early 90s, it was more a case of innovation just to keep us rolling or to keep the bikes. I don't think there was a big sort of money plan in there for G Sport. I think it was a case of our bikes are falling to bits. What can be engineered, what can be changed that will help us. So the kind of group of guys that we were riding with, we kind of, a few of us inadvertently became just kind of like G Sport test riders, just because we were there. We rode with George. And he said, he'd say, what do you think of this? Try this out. So, we did try some weird stuff, some stuff that didn't end up going out, I don't think. At one point I had some forks with no dropouts and they were hollow at the bottom. And so the pegs basically went in with a stem bolt, a wedge bolt. So you'd wedge your pegs into your forks and your sort of wheel was almost encased within it. And so George, tried those out for a while, and he played around with all sorts of ideas. Some of them brilliant ideas. Some of them really worked well. Some of the ones he tried in the early days didn't work so well. But he was just trying his best to kind of make products that would help people ride, really. So I think the first thing he did was washers, just tiny little washers that were really thick. So you put them in your dropouts, because back then dropouts were just wafer thin. They'd just bend if you looked at them. So these thick washers, you put them in there and bolt your pegs on, and suddenly it kind of gave you a bit of stability in that back end. So the back end wouldn't sort of wash out or bend as much. So innovation can come in weird forms, I guess. But I mean, as I say, we at the time there just wasn't a lot of option in terms of what you could buy. What was on the market. As I say, because it had declined in the late 80s, the bike companies didn't really want to invest in innovation because, they didn't know if it was going to keep declining and, they might just sell one frame the next year. So it wasn't a kind of a lucrative opportunity for people to innovate in BMX at that point.
And it's really interesting that they, the G Sport George basically made these washers for the dropouts, mainly because, you know, with him working with Odyssey nowadays as well as Sunday, it's just funny to see that like Sunday essentially got their start because of the giant dropouts on the frames, right? That was a very big deal. Like everybody was wrecking dropouts on frames, and they came out with these nice hollow dropouts that were nice and thick, and they worked really well. So I don't know, I just find that kind of hilarious that they're both like coming from the same thing essentially, you know?
Yeah. But I mean, it's, you know, it's nice to sort of be able to say that, you know, BMX is in such a better condition health-wise these days. You know, I mean, the quality of the stuff that you can buy, quality of the bikes is just through the roof. You know, even a beginner, you know, a beginner can go out and spend £400, say that's on a complete setup, and that bike would be better than the pro models that we were, you know, riding early 90s. You know, you could, if you went out and bought a GT team, let's say, a world tour around sort of 89, 90, that bike would break. You know, they weren't really made for where the riding had gone. So, yeah, it's great to see that kids can go out today and get a beginner bike, £400, and, you know, they can just throw whatever they want at it, and it's going to be pretty much bulletproof.
Absolutely. And I think a great example of this too is the fact that nowadays you can go out and buy a complete bike for, you know, $800 Canadian, and it'll have a free coaster on it and 4 pegs, right? And that's like kind of the modern thing. That's what everybody's looking for. But it's just hilarious that, like, you know, back when I started, dude, no way. Like, coasters had been around for maybe 4 or 5 years at this point, but it was still very expensive to get one. Nobody really knew too much about the technology. It was basically KHE, like, lending out their patent to other companies to make coasters. Like, the first coaster that I rode was a KHE, and then I just never really went back to them. I've been a cassette rider ever since, so...
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of older riders, or a lot of guys my age, you know, we kind of talk about... you know, old school and mid school and back in the day and all those sort of terms. And it's easy to get kind of, you know, rose tinted, nostalgic kind of glasses about it all. But, you know, the harsh reality was that it was pretty crappy back then. You know, the scene was great and the people were great and the riding was going through the roof, but, you know, the bikes were lousy. You know, I knew many people who quit riding because they just couldn't afford it anymore. Their bikes were breaking all the time, and, you know, yeah, I mean, I don't have any, you know, I don't kind of sort of look back at that period and get all romantic, put it that way. You know, they were great. It's a great time in my life, you know, kind of learning to ride and meeting people and, you know, becoming 17, 18, traveling around the country, starting to enter competitions, all that sort of stuff. Amazing time. But I wouldn't sort of say that was a golden period of BMX because the bikes were lousy.
Definitely. It's funny that, like, everybody is really reminiscent on it, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with the riding rather than the bikes themselves, because I think that most dudes would agree that if they could have the same kind of riding style and the same, like, vibes, but the bikes that we have nowadays, you know, it would probably be one of the best scenes out there. And it's really interesting, right? Because things are really starting to pick back up in BMX. There's just so many dudes doing it, right? Like, right now, the list of pros out there, there's so many. It's hard to even name off everybody that's a pro rider, right? And back then, I feel like that's kind of a little bit different, right? There definitely wasn't as big of a scene. So, but
I mean, I don't even know if, you know, when we talk about pro riders, obviously, you know, we're talking about riders who are getting, you know, retainers or fees, or, you know, they're able to earn a living off it. But I think there was a period probably up to 95, maybe 96, where, you know, if you entered a pro contest, you might win it and get like a T-shirt. You know, you're not getting a check. You know, you get a T-shirt, you might get some shin pads, stuff like that. You know, I didn't know of anybody who was making any money, you know, out of BMX. You know, even sort of, you know, even some of the pros who are riding today, you know, people like Jamie. You know, I think in the early 90s, I don't think I know for a fact he was holding down a job, you know, and then he was kind of going out and killing it on the half pipe at, you know, King of Concrete. So, you know, I think even the top pros around that time, they weren't getting anything financially out of it, or if they were, it wasn't enough just to ride and live off riding money.
Definitely. Yeah, man. I fully agree with you there. It's things have changed a lot, right? There's a lot of pros that can live off of what they're getting nowadays. Some people
Yeah.
don't get as much as others, but I think that's just dependent on the brand and who you're working with and the products that you're putting out and also how good you are at marketing yourself, right?
Yeah,
But
that's a big part of it, I think. I mean, even and I think it always has been. To be honest with you, I think it's no good being shy. I don't think if you want to get out there and I think particularly today with social media and the way it all works, I think you've got to play the game. Well, the pros have got to play the game. They've got to sort of push themselves forward as a brand, I guess. I mean, that kind of I think there's an element of truth that's been there all the way through BMX because I remember getting a little bit of magazine coverage, or started to get a bit of magazine coverage early 90s. But the initial coverage that I got, or some of the initial coverage that I got, was because I knew a guy, a photographer, who was sending stuff into magazines. So I kind of go and hang around with that guy, and we'd do photo shoots and do sequences and stuff like that. I knew he was going to send it in. I could have just have easily said, you know what, no, I'm not going to shoot any photos. I'm just going to write. So the fact that I went, well, yeah, let's try and shoot a photo. If you're going to send it to the magazine, that's great. If it gets published, amazing. But I could have been shy about it and said, no, I'm not going to do it.
yeah, definitely. And I think it is something that, like, especially nowadays with social media and everything, you have to be the kind of person that is able to be, open about what they're doing and everything about that, right? Like, as a BMX rider nowadays, I think it takes less of skill, but more of like how great you are at promoting yourself, right? There's a lot of dudes, yeah. I'm not going to name names, but there's a lot of riders out there that I look at and I say, wow, I can't believe that this guy is a pro rider. And then, it really just comes down to the fact that they're really good at doing what they do, right? Selling and making sure that, the companies are getting what they want out of it, because it is a two-way street, right? Like, obviously any kind of business relationship is. So, but yeah, just to move on from that, let's talk a little bit about the first set of G Sport bars. So the G Sport bars, you actually had a little bit of a input on those, did you not?
Yeah. I mean, again, at the time, this was down to choice. There was not. I wanted some knee saver bars basically because I rode a lot of sort of. I rode flatland and I rode ramp. I rode a bit of everything, and I was wanting to do a lot of sort of tech stuff on mini ramps and stuff like that, where my sort of feet were going forwards. And I was catching my knees on the bars all the time because there wasn't a lot of choice. If you wanted a strong bar in the early 90s, I think slam bars were pretty much, the only way to go. Standard had just done strip bars, and they were a knee saver. But again, they were incredibly expensive in the UK to get hold of. So if you wanted a knee saver, they were Harrow, but you would bend them instantly around that sort of time, unfortunately. So slam bars were most riders' bar of choice, even if you wanted a knee saver. They weren't a knee saver, they were a two-piece. So I basically said to George, look, why didn't you do a knee saver type bar, but just make them feel like slam bars? So usually we took my slam bars off and he measured them up and ended up making a set of bars that were basically the same feel as slam bars, but they were a knee saver. I think they were 8-piece actually. There were loads of pieces in them. And they did really well with them. They look a bit over-engineered for today's standards, and they look like there's far too many bits of metal on them. But at the time, they were strong. They didn't bend. They weren't going anywhere, and they were knee savers. So you didn't injure your knee every time you were doing flatland moves or anything where your knees were going forward. So yeah, that was it. It was as simple as, can you make a pair something that feels like slam bars? I hope this is not going to get him into any trouble legally, because it was literally exactly the same measurement. You know what I mean? I'm sure it won't. But that was the story behind them, really, just to kind of get a pair of knee savers. And as I say, it was again down to necessity. There wasn't a lot of choice. Particularly, you didn't want to buy a pair of bars for, I don't know what they were like back then. Certainly the best part of, let's say, £70. But you didn't want to buy a pair of bars and then do a stair drop or something like that and bend them in a week or so. And sadly, with the parts that you would get from, say, GT or Harrow at the time, I mean, I know it's not the case now, but sadly at the time, you'd bend their stuff in a month, weeks basically. So there wasn't the choice out there, and as I say, buying those sort of new products that were coming in, the standard strip bars, which were really strong, really cool, knee savers, but they were just hellishly expensive. That wasn't an option either. So, I think that's where they came from. That's where that bar design came from.
Wow, that's incredible, man. And it's funny that, it's basically an exact copy, right? But most things in BMX, I bet you there's multiple frames out there that if you take a look at the standover and the chainstay length and literally every little thing on it, bottom bracket height and everything, I guarantee there's a few frames out there that are literally the exact same. There has to be.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Particularly nowadays, where there's, the frames are very much, there are a lot of frames out there that kind of come from a similar kit. Let's say, I know what specs I like to ride these days. I know how long the chainstay is that I like to ride. I know what the top tube is. And I know that if I go online, I could find, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 different options, pretty much the same spec. So, yeah, I guess that, a lot of it today has come down to sort of how strong is the brand, because, most of the bikes are strong enough now. It's not as if you're going to pick a bike over strength anymore, because they are all pretty strong out there. I think again, just going back to what you were saying earlier on about the people who are getting paid and are not necessarily the best rider, but they're the most kind of popular dude or whatever. I think that's kind of the way it's gone. The brand seems to be all powerful. Well, I don't know if that's right or wrong. It's just a fact. It's just kind of commerce, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And back then it was really more of an accepted thing when bikes broke. And I think that's kind of one thing that I'm really stoked on, is that in 2021, most brands are going to come out and say, like, hey, this stuff will break. However, it's going to take a while, right? Like, the frames that I've been riding nowadays are way stronger than the stuff I was riding 10 years ago. Maybe I've just gotten better as a rider, but even just the difference in 10 years is ridiculous. Yeah.
And again, I think, it's amazing and brilliant where BMX is as a sport now, in terms of the stuff you need to do it, the bikes, the parts, they're affordable. If you, again, just going back to what I was saying earlier on, if you adjust, let's say, a complete bike for inflation from, let's say, mid-90s, and work out what it should be priced today based on, how things have generally increased in price, BMX beats inflation. The prices have actually gone the other way. BMX, complete bikes and frames they're cheaper now than they were 20 years ago, pound for pound. And then obviously they should be more expensive. So the quality's gone up, the price has gone down. There's loads of choice out there. So I'm just, I don't get all misty-eyed when I think about 80s bikes and 90s bikes. And, I've sort of spoke about this on Ride On quite a lot. I'm not one of these kind of older dudes who kind of, want to start restoring old bikes or stuff like that. Bikes are there to be ridden. And the bikes of today are just miles better than the bikes we had, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And good. I'm stoked that they've moved on.
Yeah, it definitely needs to, right? If we were still on the stuff that we were riding 30 years ago, BMX would not be what it is today. That's just an absolute, it has to progress along with the riding, right? The stuff that dudes are doing, it's just ridiculous, right? But yeah, moving on from there. So, going back to kind of the 90s and what you were involved in back then, I know that you were in quite a few magazines that were pretty popular back then. So, obviously, as you mentioned, Rad was a magazine back then. And then there was also Ride and Freedom. So when did you get your first magazine coverage? And something I love to know is, do you still have that magazine? Because I feel like that's something you got to hang on to,
Well, I don't. I'll tell you what it was, and I don't have the magazine. I didn't even have a picture of the article, but somebody sent me it recently. In fact, it was John from Volt BMX. He kind of kindly sent me a scan of it. It was in Rad, which was cool actually at the time because I was saying Rad was a magazine that started off. It had a different name. It was fully BMX, and then it became sort of half BMX, half skating, and then eventually it was 2 pages BMX if we were lucky. So because there was so little BMX in that magazine, but it was still seen as quite a cool magazine, to be featured in that mag, or to get a picture in there was really cool. So that was the first mag that I got any coverage in, and I can't even remember what year it was. I'm guessing it might have been 90, possibly around maybe 1990, somewhere time around there. There was an indoor skate park, which was a really weird thing that opened up in Sheffield, and it was in the basement of 2 sort of terraced houses that had been knocked through. So, I mean, almost like the space that you would have for, let's say, a large living room and dining room in a normal house. They just basically knocked it through and put this skate park in the basement of this house. So there was an opening jam there, and I was kind of lucky enough to get snapped and got a photo in Rad. So that was cool. Yeah, I was really stoked with that.
That's awesome, dude. Was the ceiling pretty low then if it's in a basement?
Yeah. And they had Spine in there. There's Spine Mini in there. There was a rider. I actually thought I rode it for a while, and it almost became like my local. There was a Spine in the middle of it. I remember freeing the Spine. First time I freed the Spine, I didn't realize that there was a girder supporting the whole house above it that was hanging down, clipped the back of my head on this girder, and literally just dropped to the flat bottom out cold. I think that was my first ever concussion actually on the BMX. So that was an interesting one. But I rode there quite a lot, and I thought I was kind of, I thought I got the measure of the place. I thought I could ride it pretty well. And then I went through one evening, and there were tire marks on the ceiling.
Wow.
There's a guy called Dave Clark, who's an absolutely incredible rider. And he'd been through apparently in session day and aired so high out the Mini that he basically clipped the ceiling with his tires. So, but it was cool. It was a cool scene. And, I guess it was the start of when people were trying to build places to ride. Because as I said before, there wasn't really a lot of spots to ride. So people starting to build minis into, warehouses, or maybe rent an industrial spot and put something in there. It was kind of starting to happen, I guess, but it was still few and far between. So there was still very little to ride for a while. But yeah, that was that spot in Sheffield. It was cool.
Dude, that's wicked. Yeah. I was going to say yesterday I was actually out riding my buddy's house, and he's got this like really ghetto shack kind of like shed thing that he's built, this ridiculous, like it's almost like a bowl, but it's just the whole thing is just transition everywhere, right? But the lowest part of it is like 7.5 feet tall, which doesn't seem that, that short until you're in there on top of the pedals and you're like, I got about a foot until I'm going to hit my head. And you're just carving up this wall, like, really leaning. It gets gnarly. He ended up doing something similar where he went up it the one day and hit his head on one of the beams and knocked himself out. So he went back and just like chopped that particular spot out of the supports and just like, it's, I think an extra 2 inches he gains out of that, but it honestly saves you.
Yeah, I mean, I think over the years, particularly around that sort of time, I rode some weird spots. There was kind of like a phase where skate shops would go, not through their sort of storage area, I guess, and try and put a ramp in there. So there's a few skate shops in the UK that put ramps into their skate shops, and they were so tight. There was often no deck on one side, or if there was a deck, it might be 6 inches. But as I say, you were just happy to get somewhere to ride, particularly in the winter when the weather was getting bad. To ride ramps inside, particularly around 91, 92, that was really, really rare. The only sort of indoor parks that you saw that were of any size tended to be, you tend to, if you saw skate videos, you might get the skate video, H Street or something like that. You'd see indoor parks there, but an indoor park of any size was just a kind of a pipe dream. It just wasn't happening around that sort of time, really. We were just kind of, it just felt a million miles away from where we were, put it that way.
Yeah, definitely. And then I do know that in the late 80s in the late 90s, you guys actually gained a new park called Rehab. And you've been
Yeah,
posting quite a bit about Rehab lately, and it seems like it
yeah.
was definitely a great park. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about that place, man.
So that was a weird one because, I said earlier on, I kind of grown up in a sort of small town in the north of England. It was quite industrial. There's not a lot going on there. It wasn't Cali, that was for sure. It was pretty rough and ready. So, we'd see indoor parks on skate videos. You might sort of see sort of pictures of an indoor park, I don't know, halfway across the country, maybe a small one. But then we got this kind of, oh, by the way, this was pre-internet, of course. So, when you needed to find something out, you had to kind of ask someone who knew someone else who could possibly ring someone and find out this from this guy, and he knew this guy. So you get like information on this grapevine. So we got kind of a word that there was an indoor skate park opening up in basically the town next door to where I lived. And that town was called Wakefield, and it's the most like unremarkable town in the world. Sorry if you're from Wakefield, by the way, but it is really unremarkable. There's nothing special about it. So we didn't really believe it at first. We didn't say, oh yeah, there's just nobody's going to open an indoor skate park in Wakefield, because it was kind of like the butthole of our area basically. So we went and drove there, basically around the area where we were told it might have been built, which was like an industrial area, like units and lockups and stuff like that. And we drove around it for hours. As I say, no internet. No, there was nothing in the magazines about this place. So we just literally were going off something that a skater had told us, I think. I think a skater had said, oh, yeah, there's a park opening. So we went to check it out. We drove around for about an hour, couldn't find it. And eventually we turned down another sort of quadrant of this sort of industrial area just around the corner. And there was a 30-foot shutter door, open, light flooding out into the car park. And inside was the skate park. And it was just the weirdest thing in the world that it was there, on my doorstep. And at that point, there weren't a lot of indoor parks in the UK at all. There might have been, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 other indoor parks. Not a great deal at all. But yeah, it was there. It was set up by two kind of, well, originally there was 2 guys who were like into bodybuilding. And they were into bodybuilding, and they decided they were going to get into aggressive inline skating. So that was kind of kicking off. And I don't know, they just went out and borrowed a load of money and got together with another guy. And nobody really quite knows where his money came from. So it was all a bit dubious, basically. But they opened this park. Initially, it started off as 1 room, then became 2 rooms. Then he moved into the next room, and eventually it was a huge, huge indoor park with vert ramp, indoor trail section, mini ramp, streets. I mean, it was just like a dream come true, and that was it. After that, once that opened, that kind of changed the game for me, really, because I was just riding there all the time. I wasn't going to go and ride street when that was there. I wasn't going to go and dig dirt jumps when that was there. So, yeah, I mean, it was 10 minutes down the road from me. At the time, I took a job just so I could kind of make a bit of money and maximize my riding time. So I took a job where I did 3 long days, really long shifts, like 12-hour shifts. So I got all my work done for the week in 3 days. So I was there at 4 days a week riding just all the time. I mean, that was really when my riding started to kind of move forward, I guess. And it started to grow a scene, because England's not massive. I mean, it's pretty densely populated. There's a lot of people, but it's not massive. So the north of England started to kind of gravitate towards this park because there was nothing else, or in any sort of circumference in any direction. So Manchester riders started coming across. So we'd get people like John Taylor and all that sort of crew would come over. We'd get sort of guys from Liverpool coming down. We'd get all the Scottish guys coming down, all sort of Team Sano, Go-Go, Grant Smith. We eventually would go and form BSD. All those guys were started to come down. we'd then get all the Derby crew coming up. So that was Jamie, Bestwick. He would come up and ride. And so we had, from out of nowhere, we suddenly had just this most amazing scene on our doorstep. It was, it was like a dream come true, to be honest.
Definitely. And I don't know if it's the same park from some of your footage in 1995, but dude, it looks awesome. Like, your footage back then was incredible too, by the way. I just want to say that right away, because a lot of the stuff in there was, I don't know, man. It's like still to this day would hold up, There's a trick in there that you do on a ledge where it's like a feeble to nose pick and then 360. I don't know why we don't see that anymore. I mean, it's got to be just because we don't have front brakes anymore. But, dude, that's something that I'm going to start doing, because I got front brakes, so I'm going to make it happen.
You need a sharp front brake for that one, because you're kind of going down. Particularly if you're going to ledge downhill anyway.
Yeah.
It's going downhill. You've really got to pitch into it. But, I mean, a lot of that footage was, that was kind of street footage, I guess, just before rehab opened up. So that was probably in and around Sheffield.
Right.
So we had a little video camera or whatever, so we'd film each other and, gather footage and stuff like that. So that the clips those clips were from those sort of street sessions. But once once rehab kind of opened, it was kind of all about that's rehab there. So that was like one of the first rooms that they'd opened, the black room. Most of the kind of clips in this bit that are in a skate park are going to be shot at rehab. The rest of it's just kind of street in and around Sheffield and those sort of areas, really. But the street riding started to take a back seat, really, because, as I say, we had this huge skate park on our doorstep. There you go. That's so. I mean, another funny thing about the skate park was that the building that they went into, they originally used it to train construction workers. So they were sort of half-built buildings, like a one-story building, stuff like that. So they built the ramps up to these buildings. So, you could transfer off them and fluff the roof, or you could stall on the roof, stuff like that. So in a lot of the clips, you'll kind of see walls and weird sort of stuff behind there. And as I say, they were just basically weird bits of construction that they'd use to train, trainee construction workers.
Definitely. Sorry, just give me a second here. I'm just moving this back. Honestly, it looked like that was probably one of the best like indoor spots at the time. The place looks huge. And
I mean, there was everything to ride there as well. And the people who ran it were really cool. They'd say, "Oh, you want to build?" We'd kind of say, "Oh, can we build a little bit of an extension here, or can we change this bit, or can we do that?" And they were really cool about it. They let us build pretty much anything we wanted. So sub boxes and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like my home from home for a long, long time. I just rode there all the time.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about 1996, the year that I was born. You were shredding still, man. You had some lost and found footage that I'm going to play here in a second behind me. But I was really blown away by this part in particular. The mini ramp clips, were incredible. The stuff on there was, there's a lot of really cool tricks in there. So like I said, it's lost and found footage. Did you guys ever use it for anything, or how did you basically find this stuff?
So this footage kind of came about when I was kind of in when I was in a period of my life where I wasn't riding. I'd had a injury which kind of made me sort of step away from BMX, and I spent quite a bit of time away from BMX. I didn't really think I'd ever ride again at one point. I thought that was it. I've been too long away. I'm kind of done. But I was looking at doing a sort of documentary about the mid-school scene. So I think I put a post out on a group or on a forum, I think it would have been, saying, I'm looking for some mid-school footage. And I'm looking at doing a mid-school documentary. What have you got? And somebody just dropped me a line straight away saying, "Do you know what? I've got a load of clips of you from '96." And it was one of those weird things in that at the time, I think I was so busy riding that I just didn't document any of it. Around this time, I didn't bother filming myself or, film. I mean, today you shoot loads of stuff on your phone and stuff like that. But back then you had to get a little VHS camera or Video 8, I think it will have been, stuff like that. And then you had to transfer that back onto tape, and so editing it was a pain in the arse. So, I would say late 90s, I didn't shoot anything really. And at the time, I didn't care. I was too busy having a blast and riding and doing all sorts of cool stuff. But when I got older, I kind of thought, I wish I had something from that period. So, as I say, I'd kind of set out to maybe look at doing a documentary on mid-school BMX. But somebody just dropped me a line and said, I've got a tape and you're on it. So I was like, brilliant, send me it, let me see it. And it turned out to be like quite a few sessions from, 96, which is kind of really the height, I guess, of that rehab scene. Yeah, those are the dudes who shot it. It's Charlie Shaw who hit me up, I think, and said, I've got some clips of you. So I sent it through. So that's where it came from. But that was years later. I mean, that was probably around, I don't know, maybe just 10 years ago, that footage kind of found its way into my lap. So it's just weird seeing yourself, back in the day when you didn't even, I had no recollection of shooting that at all.
Wow, dude, that's a really crazy story, I've been going through all the old footage that I've been filming over the years, and I do it all on Instagram so people can kind of just jump in and see if I filmed anything of them. But yeah, really similar thing, right? As a filmer, yeah. I find that like all the stuff that I film, if I haven't looked at it in the last month, I'm going to forget that I completely even filmed it, Yeah. There was a lot of stuff.
I mean, I think, one thing I would say to anybody today is don't be too cool not to shoot yourself. Because one day you're going to go, oh, I wish I had a bit of something from that. I wish I had a clip from this time in my life. And, I try and make a little edit now each year, just as a bookmark of where things are and where I am. And I know for a fact, because I had, a period of time away from BMX, I know that one day, when I'm much older, let's say, I will want to look back and have a look at this period of my life. So, I think being able to shoot stuff on your phone is just, that's just a gift. I would say to anybody, document stuff, keep a record, make little edits, because one day there'll be treasures to you,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of why I filmed 2 videos, was literally that, because if you got 2 full-length DVDs that you can go back to, I'm not going to have a DVD player forever, but I've got those files saved forever, so definitely.
And it'll be gold one day, those, Cam. You'll kind of, you will look at them and just go, I'm so glad that I did this,
Definitely. I do that now. I have 1 copy of each video that I haven't opened, that I'm not going to open. And then I have a copy that is, opened, that is my personal copy, essentially. It's just one of those things that I always want to remember that I have that,
Yeah. As I say, it'll pay you back. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Yeah. Moving on to 1997, there was a video that you were in. Forgive me, I cannot remember the name of it. However, you did a 270 to Smith, which is one of my favorite mini ramp tricks ever. But then you go into a nose pick and 180 back in, and that is seriously one of the coolest things that I've seen in a long time. And I know it was more of a, like a 90s and early 2000s trick, but I seriously want to see that make a comeback, and I am setting out to learn that because it is just so cool looking.
Yeah, funny enough, I think Mike O'Connell has been on my case to try and get that trick back. I don't even know if I can do it. It's a long time since I've done that trick. I don't know if my back could stand it these days. So, but yeah, it takes a minute. I think this section is from one of the Cheeky Monkey videos. I don't know if you're aware of the Cheeky Monkey series made by a good friend of mine called Ross Milne. He documented a lot of the scene around us around this sort of time, and produce some really cool videos. And I think that this 97 section's from Dirty Jumpers. I think it's from that video.
Yeah, it is. I just checked the name there. Yeah, again, awesome mini ramp tricks along here. I love that hang 5 to, front brake and then go backwards with the whiplash. It looks just so good,
Yeah, thanks, man. I think, that was kind of really my thing around this sort of time. I was doing loads of front wheel stuff, loads of kind of rolling stuff, and nose wheelie variations, all sorts of stuff like that. Trying to sort of take them as fast as I could and really sort of play around with different ideas with them. So that was it's as I say, it's I don't know if that trick's going to come out of the bag anytime soon, though, Cam. To be honest.
Oh man, don't break my heart. I want to see that again.
I'll try. If I get it, I'm going to tag you in it.
Please do. Something that I also love is the use of flatland tricks on the deck, right? It's something that, I brought it up a second ago, but there's so many different things that you guys were doing then, especially like, into decade, on the deck and then back in. That just looks real cool. Yeah, there's a lot of that stuff that I wish that we would bring back these days, but nobody really rides brakes. I don't know about you guys in the UK, but over here it's like maybe a 30-70 split, right? 30% ride brakes and the other 70 are brakeless.
Yeah, I kind of feel that front brakes are starting to I'm starting to see more of them. But it's just a different way of riding that the generation that are sort of really pushing it now, they have it's just a completely different way of riding, and it's amazing, and and it's nice. I think sometimes it's nice that some tricks get sort of almost like sealed in time, and that they don't kind of move on. I mean, some tricks get sealed in time because they're kind of a bit naff, nobody wants to do them anymore. Others just kind of get left by the wayside, or I think one of the other things that was kind of that played into that those sort of tricks was that riders now seem to be very much focused on specific disciplines, let's say. So they will be a trails rider, or they will be a street rider, but there might be a street rider who does mostly ledges, or there might be a street rider that does mostly, let's say, rails, or everything's become really sort of categorized, and riders very much seem to approach BMX like that as well. They kind of put themselves into these little kind of pigeonholes. I think throughout the earlier parts of BMX, I think riders kind of just rode BMX as a whole. As I say, I raced, and then I would, I rode flatland for a bit. I rode dirt. You would ride everything. That was kind of part of the deal. It didn't really start to sort of really fragment, I don't think, until, I don't know, mid-2000s, I guess, when it really started to split. Part of me laments that a little bit. I'm kind of sad that, I'm sad that we don't get flatlanders at big events anymore. I think that idea of the BMX family coming together and events where every part of that BMX family can be represented, you don't really see much these days, and I do think that's a little bit sad. And I also think that's why some of those tricks kind of, you don't see them much either, because the flatlanders not hanging around with the street riders so much anymore. But having said that, look at what's happened to street riding. Flatland's a big part of street now, isn't it? So, I suppose there is a crossover in one way, but there are, as I say, there are some tricks that kind of get left behind, some of them for good reasons, but some of them just get forgotten, I guess.
Definitely. And I can't agree with you more when it comes to BMX being very categorized, right? And I was actually just talking to some good friends of mine yesterday about the fact that, like, BMX is so different nowadays than it was 20 years ago, where 20 years ago you rode what you had and that was everything, right? Like, if you showed up to a set of trails, you were going to ride those trails. And then if you were riding street, you're riding street. Nowadays, It really seems that people are very picky on what they ride, right? There's a lot of friends of mine that they seriously can't hit a dirt jump to save their life, man. And like, it's just one of those things where, like, personally, I want to be able to go to anything and put anything in front of me and be able to ride it, right? The only thing that I haven't been able to ride at this point is a literal mega ramp, right? Like, if I could, dude, that's the last thing I got to cross off on my list. I can ride vert ramp, I can ride flat ground, I can ride street, park, dirt, everything. It's just the only thing I haven't done is hit a mega ramp, and I don't think I ever will, but we'll see.
Yeah. I don't fancy the jump into it. The jump into it looks horrendous, doesn't it?
Oh my God, yeah.
70-foot jump or something like that. But I mean, just going back to what you were saying there, I think that sort of idea of that sort of separation of BMX, I think it's been a product of the fact that BMX is huge now, which is amazing. You know, you go to any town now, you'll find maybe 20 riders. You know, and even in a small town, you know, BMX is massive now. So I think when BMX wasn't so big, if there was two riders in the town and one of them was a vert rider and the other one was a flatlander, they're going to hang out, you know, because they're the only two guys there. And you know, you kind of, if you multiply that by a nationwide, by a country, let's say, you know, if you've not got a great deal of riders, all those riders might be doing different things, but you're going to kind of all come together. So I think it's easier to have that crossover with the different disciplines when the scene's smaller. I think now it's huge. You know, people can kind of get on and do their own thing. And, you know, as I say, I'm never one to go, oh, it was all so much better in my day and stuff like that. Because, you know, it wasn't to a certain degree. It was good. But, you know, where BMX is now, I think is great. You know, I wouldn't change a thing, to be honest.
Definitely. And I think that we need more riders like yourself who are able to kind of give us a blast from the past, because your 2019 video part was all obviously incredible, right? A lot of those like mid-school or early 2000s kind of tricks and combos, you know, 20 years later, essentially. Yeah. So how long did you take to film that? And was that the first video that you had released since, you know, those earlier days?
No, I mean, I've done like a little edit each year. So, you know, I'd kind of, you know, since I sort of got back on it and started riding again, I'd sort of, you know, I'd cut a little edit each year, as I say, just like a bookmark, really, you know, so that one day I can look back and say, okay, what was I doing when I was 45? Or, you know, what was I doing when I was 46? Because obviously these edits show where you've been in the country, they show where you've been riding, all that sort of stuff. So I think when it came to 2019, I kind of wanted to do something that I think I wanted to sort of try and push myself to ride as well, or if not as well as better than I did when I was in my 20s. So I just kind of set out to try and top myself, you know, really in terms of the riding. And this was shot all over the country at different parks. You know, a lot of this was at ride-on sessions or, you know, places like that. And as I say, I just really wanted to see what I could do. I'd kind of gone through a transition period in this year anyway, in that I think, and we'll probably talk about this in a bit, but I think if you're an older rider who has a bit of time out of the sport, gaining your confidence back is very, very difficult. You know, it takes a long time, years, for that confidence to build back. You know, you might know all the tricks inside out, you know, you might know them inside you, but just gaining the confidence to do them is a real challenge in itself. So I just felt, you know, it kind of all came together. I was, 46, 47 when I shot most of this. And I just wanted to, you know, see what I could do, really sort of push myself as far as I could.
Are you still on this white BSD Freedom?
No, I'm riding an S&M MOD now.
Nice.
I mean, the Freedom was a lovely bike, and I at this point I was living in Surrey near London, and I rode a lot of flatland. You know, I rode pretty much a lot of park, but this was very much a year where I started to try and take that safety catch off a little bit and just kind of uncut my riding a little bit and push myself a little bit more. So. And that kept going actually through 2019, through 2020. Eventually, I just thought I need a longer bike. I need something that's a little bit more stable. And I've not ridden S&M for years. I mean, one of the first sponsors I ever got was a shop sponsor, and they set me up with a S&M Heavy back in the day. You know, that's really going back. But I'd not ridden S&M for years, and I really, really wanted to kind of try one again. Although I would say the Freedom frame, for anybody who wants an all-round frame, is really, really nice, really responsive, and you know, just kind of everything in the right place, perfect for park and stuff like that. But as I say, I just wanted something that I could push a little bit bigger with, and where I live now, there's a great trail scene, you know, so I just figured I'd kind of, you know, keep it going, keep progressing if I can, and go for something a bit longer.
Definitely, yeah. Those Freedom frames are they're pretty rad, man. And I love the way that that bike looked, just in general, right? Like that nice white, frame fork bar combo is really good.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then the chrome
yeah.
wheels. Yeah, man. There's nothing better than a really good looking bike, you know.
I
Mine.
actually I'd sprayed the forks, so the forks were Audi, what the F 25s I think they were, but they only come in black.
Yeah,
So I'd kind of done a paint job on them and sprayed them white, and I think I sprayed the bars as well. I think they were black, and I remember the first because I thought it'll have a bit nice sort of retro feel. Do you know what I mean? It's like a nod to the past, but in a modern sort of frame. And I'm not one for pictures of bikes. You know, I'm sure we'll talk about this in a minute, but, you know, people posting pictures of their bike on the internet, they can save it as far as I'm concerned, you know. So, but I took a picture of it. I sent it to Grant at BSD. I said, look, retro BSD, mate. I said, I'm not doing your image any good at all. But and he actually said, oh, post it up. But I managed to resist.
yeah, fair enough. Yeah, while we're on the topic, so how do you feel about people posting their bikes online? You're just not really a fan of it?
Well, it kind of leads on to the sort of ride on for me. You know, why we started ride on and why I wanted to start ride on. I had a long period out of BMX, and I wanted to ride again. I knew I had to do something again. I kind of felt really washed up and over it, and you know, I had knee surgery years ago to kind of repair the knee that got injured. But by that point, by the time I had my knee surgery, it'd been so long since I've ridden. You know, it'd been years. I think it was like 6 years between having the slam and getting the surgery. And I thought I was done by that point. You know, I mean, maybe I was done at that point anyway. But so I had a long period out of it, and then I came back to BMX. And so the reason I came back to BMX, I kind of moved to an area. I was living near a guy called Mike O'Connell, who's a good friend of mine, amazing mini ramp rider. And he, you know, I'd see him in the local area. And he, every time I saw him, he'd say, when are you going to get a new bike? When are you going to start riding again? When are you going to get a bike? So eventually I got a bike. And I thought, well, I'm going to start riding again. I was kind of, you know, just on the cusp of my 40s. And I thought, well, there must be guys out there still riding, you know, from my era. I must be able to kind of reconnect with people. There must be other riders like me. So I went on Facebook and started looking around. And, you know, I suddenly found all these groups, mid-school riders or mid-school life and Rad BMX UK and stuff like that. So I thought, this is great. I'll be able to connect with loads of riders and, you know, we'll be able to find places to ride. And then I hit up these sites and all I got was just pictures of bikes. Here's my bike, or here's my bike from 20 years ago that I've just restored, or here's my bike from, you know, that I always wanted as a kid and I've restored it, or I've collected this bike. And it was just an endless stream of pictures of bikes. So when I finally started Ride On, I kind of made myself a promise that there's never going to be a picture of a bike on Ride On. It was going to be about riding bikes, not about, you know, looking at pictures of bikes.
Definitely. And I think there's a big difference because on your Ride On website, you guys actually do bike checks, but you know, that's what these guys are riding, not just a photo of their bike, essentially.
Yeah. We just thought it'd be really interesting to, you know, people who are posting regularly on the site and posting stuff that's inspiring people and that's really stoking people. We just thought it'd be cool to kind of share with members, you know, what they're riding, why they chose the parts they did. You know, what's the story behind the parts? You know, is it something they've always rode? Is one, you know, what is there something that's set up specifically for their tricks? And I think as a, you know, once you become an older rider, you do have more of an interest in, not so much in the bikes themselves, but in, you know, what certain parts are going to do for you and for your riding. You know, I'm particularly thinking about sort of the height of bars and things like that. You know, because as I say, you know, if you're riding in your 40s, you're probably going to know about your back, put it that way. You know,
definitely.
You're going to be aware of your back. So, you know, just little tips like that on different bar heights and stuff like that. I just thought it'd be cool. And they seem to go down pretty well, to be honest. Yeah,
I was actually just reading Owen Clegg's bike earlier today, and that's pretty rad, man, because he's on the brand new United Caveman frame, which,
Yeah.
not saying that it's going to happen, but there might be a goat man riding a goat man frame very soon. So we'll see.
I like it. I like it. It
Oh,
looks a cool
man.
bike, actually, doesn't it?
Dude, I'm totally getting one. I hit up Harvester, who's my like local shop. He supports the show, and we're gonna do a bike build at his store. And I'm getting a brand new frame, and those frames are not cheap, dude. When it comes to like the Canadian pricing, it's almost $700 Canadian for this frame.
Wow.
But of course, Harvester is the greatest guy ever. He's helping me out with it. So, yeah, dude, I'm really, really excited. It's gonna come in the nice bright yellow, and
Yeah, yeah.
I'm 100% going to make some spoof stickers and just have like Goatman instead of Caveman. I think that'd be awesome.
They look tons of fun, though. They give you, and I think they open a few doors with that sort of bash guard on the bottom. There's some interesting stuff to do on them.
Oh man, I know. I can't wait. I'm going to feel like Mike Escamilla. I feel like I could probably do a 360 to sprocket bash on a, hitching post. That'll never happen, but man, I'm going to feel like I can do it.
They're a good solid company as well, I think. I think they're a company who are coming from the right place.
Definitely, yeah. And it's one of those frames that I think up until the one that I'm on now, I had never bought a frame from essentially like the rider's standpoint, right? Like I had owned some Sabrosa frames and some We the People frames and some BSD frames actually, but everybody's pro model frame, I didn't even know who the rider was. I just liked the geometry or, the actual look of the frame. Whereas with the frame I'm on now, which is a Chase Hawk frame, I've always been a huge fan of Chase Hawk and his riding. His style is just incredible. So I bought that pretty much specifically for that, but also it helps that the geometry was perfect for me. And then, this Mike Escamilla frame is going to be rad, man. I'm really excited for it.
I think if it's good enough for rooftop, it's good enough for anybody, yeah?
Definitely. There you go. Oh, man. So, yeah, we talked a little bit about Ride On, but before we get deeper into that, let's talk a little bit about, your ACL injury that you had and kind of the surgery that went along with it. And then, where things kind of led you for your hiatus when it came to BMX. So,
yeah. So, I mean, we talked a little bit about rehab and stuff like that. And that, that scene kind of went, right into the sort of mid and then into the late 90s. So I was riding there all the way through, that period, really. I got picked up to ride for Dragonfly as well. And I did pretty well at one of the King of Concretes. And I think after the King of Concrete, I can't remember who it was. I think it might be John Taylor or someone like that. They said, "Oh, just give 70s a ring. They've got a deal for you." So I had no idea what it was basically. So I rung them up and spoke to Ian Morris, who was at 70s then, and he said, "Yeah, we've got a Dragonfly deal for you." And so he sent me the bike up, and I was stoked as hell to get a full bike and all sorts of T-shirts and stuff like that, the sort of things that kind of is really exciting when you're like a younger dude, getting a lot of T-shirts and stuff like that. But so that was really cool. I was really flattered as well to kind of being given that opportunity. So I was riding for Dragonfly. There was a contest at Northampton Radlands, which was one of the other indoor skate parks in the UK. As I say, there weren't a lot, but that was one of the other ones. So I went down there and I ended up I think I rode pretty well in the comp, but I think I was trying to shoot some photos as well so I could, give some photos to 70s for adverts or stuff like that. I can't remember what it was, but I just ended up clipping the lip on the way back in. I can't remember what trick it was, to be honest with you, but I clipped the lip front end and my body sort of went sideways. And my leg just sort of shot out, and I was kind of just going down with my leg straight out below me. So I guess I sort of nosed on the way and flipped over the bars and just put my leg out, which had taken like the full force of the slam, really. So hit the flat bottom and, just felt intense pain straight away. However, I think, as a BMXer, you kind of get used to taking the hits, don't you? I mean, I certainly did. And, I didn't think much of it. I just thought, I've just sprained something or I've, you were used to it. You're used to taking the hits. So I didn't ride again that day. I managed to get back home, and the next day I just couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't walk. I was in absolute agony. So it turned out I really severely ruptured my ACL. So that's the anterior cruciate ligament, the kind of bit that stops your knee from moving in that direction crossways. And it was a really bad injury, much worse than I thought. Even saying much worse than I thought, I was still, even when the doctors were saying, well, this is quite a severe leg trauma or a severe injury. In the back of my mind, I was still thinking, well, I'm a BMX, so I'll be back in 2 weeks. Give me 3 weeks tops, I'll be back. But as I say, you get used to it, don't you? You get used to taking it. You think you're invincible. Particularly, I think at that age, I was sort of, mid-late 20s, something around there. So, I felt like I could pretty much take anything on, really. But it turned out I'd severely torn the ACL, damaged the cartilage, damaged some tendon as well. My knee was in a real mess. So we've got the NHS in England, but back then the NHS was it was good, always has been good, but depending on where you lived in the country, would kind of determine what they would do for you, basically, for as part of your regular sort of treatment. And where I was in the country, there wasn't really a specialist in this type of injury. And they did keyhole on it. So they went into the knee and opened it up and had a look around. They stitched the cartilage, they drained it, but they couldn't obviously repair the ligament. So they said, is this your job? Does it affect your job? And at the time, I had a shitty job just so I could ride. But if I'm honest, it didn't, I sat down most of the time for my job. So I couldn't really prove that I needed this repairing, for work. And because I could work, they basically said, well, there's nothing we can do for you, So they gave me a little bit of physio to try and strengthen the muscles around it back up. But they said, that was it, basically. They couldn't do anything for me. But even then, I was kind of still in denial. I was still thinking, a couple of months, I'll be okay. I'll go back. I'll be able to ride. What the doctors know. I remember trying to ride again, I think about 2 months after it. So the swelling had sort of subsided a little bit. And I literally had the slightest sort of jar on the bike, and my knee just kind of moved so much. The pain was so intense that I was actually sick, sort of physically threw up. It was like nothing I'd ever sort of felt before. And I think that was where the reality of the injury sort of started to dawn, that this wasn't, I wasn't going to go, I'll be all right. I'll be fine. This was something a bit more serious. So, that was it, really. I tried to sort of keep riding. The sort of leg braces that you see today weren't readily available. I couldn't really ride on it. So, eventually I kind of just pulled away. As I say, if you can't ride, you can't ride. And I kind of didn't really want to sort of be around, this sounds terrible, but I didn't really want to be around BMX if I couldn't ride. It would be too painful to kind of hang around and, maybe just take pictures or stuff like that. I would find that too painful to bear. So I just kind of pulled away from it, really. That's the late 90s. And I was away from it for I guess, a good decade, maybe a little bit more. I think, another thing that I would probably say at the time was I kind of spent most of my time riding up until that point. So I was, as I say, mid to late 20s. I'd not exactly, done fabulous at education. I'd not got a great education because when I was at school, all I wanted to do was get out and ride. I dropped out of college because I wanted to ride. So suddenly I was left not being able to ride and with, in a kind of dead end job and without any, anything to fall back on. So it was horrible, horrible time. But I ended up just going to university, taking myself back into education and, learning to do something, getting an education basically. And I just thought because I can't ride, I'm going to throw, everything that I was as a rider into what I'm doing now, really. So, as much as when I was riding, that was the sole focus of my life, and I didn't really want to do anything else. When I couldn't ride, I just decided to make something else the sole focus, really. And that was it. It took me away from BMX for quite some time.
Yeah, dude, that's so unfortunate, right? Like everything that I do within BMX, I couldn't imagine not being able to ride. Like it's just one of those things that, it all stems from that, right? Like the whole thing about doing the podcast was basically that I couldn't get enough of riding, right? I wanted to be able to talk about riding all the time. And yeah, dude, it's
riding's the core of it, isn't it? Riding's the kind of core of that love, without that at the center, as great as everything is that goes around it, if you've not got the riding, the rest of it can feel a little bit weird.
Definitely, yeah, man. And that's got to be pretty difficult for you to go through, especially with them not really wanting to kind of help you in a way. Around here, it's a little different, obviously. Like everybody kind of praises the Canadian healthcare system, but it does take a long time still. Like, there's a lot of people that if they don't have the same thing, right, where they're not doing this for work, they might be out for a little while. But yeah, everybody can still get surgeries and whatnot from what I know. But that's super unfortunate. And it's pretty funny to think about just the fact that, you really didn't have much of an education for anything else, because I find that so similar for myself, right? Like before the show, we were kind of talking about how I got started in podcasting and whatnot and everything that I've done. And it's all self-taught, right? This is all stuff that I've done on my own. I've taken time to do, and, I've had plenty of times that I've really not been good at it. Right. And, but there's also a lot of, I've learned. So, but yeah, I'm the same way. I barely graduated high school. I have never went to college, never went to university or anything. And this is just kind of what I want to do. So we just got to make it happen, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, BMX kind of made me who I am and what I am. It changed my life in so many different ways. It's, I couldn't even start to tell you. So you learn some great stuff from it. You learn some great lessons. I think the trick is then, trying to apply those lessons to other parts of your life, particularly if BMX is suddenly not part of your life anymore. So, how do you then transpose those character traits, those strengths that you've learned from riding into something else? So, that's kind of what I got busy trying to do, really. Tried to get busy, still being the person I was, still sort of having those lessons from BMX, that kind of, whatever it is that BMX gives us. I tried to take that into the rest of my life. But I was honestly convinced then. I thought that was it. I'm not going to step back on a bike ever again.
Anyways, you go through your ACL surgery eventually, and was that something that you had to pay for cash?
Yeah. So I went, as I say, I went away and got busy getting an education, basically. I got an education and I decided I'm going to set up my own business. So I started a business. After hard work and a lot of kind of ups and downs and some failures and some successes, started to make a bit of money. So the first thing I did, when I had some money in my account was I got in touch with a sports injury specialist and said, I need my knee fixing. What's it going to cost? And that was it. That was, I think most people, if they have a bit of success, they might buy a nice car or, I don't know, jewelry or holidays. With me, it was a new knee. So, that was the first thing I did as soon as I could afford it. But I mean, that was, as I say, I'd gone through 3 years at university, then I built the business up that I have today. And so, that was maybe 6-7 years after the original slam.
Wow.
So I definitely thought, I didn't think at that point, I'm going to get my knee rebuilt and I'm going to start riding. I just kind of wanted to get my knee rebuilt so I had an option to do something. Because not being able to be active and not being able to do things, it guys, it's frustrating. So, but there wasn't I wasn't saying I'm going to do this just because I want to get back to BMX.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyways, after your ACL surgery, you would face some other hardships with actually dealing with cancer when you were diagnosed. So, I think everybody, has actually been kind of touched by cancer in a way. Recently we lost, our pet rabbit Senna. That was back in November, but it was due to cancer. And then we have another rabbit named Hugo, and she's got like breast cancer as well. And it's just something that's very popular within those breeds, but it's something that, whether it's a person or, a family member or even just a pet, right? Like it can affect everybody, and it's definitely hard each time. And when you originally found out, what was essentially going through your head, because that's such a difficult thing to be putting yourself and your family through.
Yeah, it was a weird one. It was weird. I mean, I think I would probably say prior to that, as I say, my kind of knee was kind of fixed again, and I'd kind of then got busy trying to fill the hole in my life that BMX had left. Because I was then getting into my, well, let me think how old I was then. So I was then getting into my early to mid 30s. You kind of get into that age where you're starting to sort of look at your life and ask yourself a few questions. And I certainly was getting a niggling feeling that there was a hole. There was something missing. I didn't quite know what it was, but I certainly felt that I wasn't as fulfilled as I wanted to be at that stage. So, the thought was in my mind that I wanted to do something again, but I wasn't sure what it was. So that went on for a few years. I did some marathons and stuff like that, and, various things to try and kind of, scratch that itch, as it were. But then I got to, well, where are we here? Late 30s, I guess we're at. Actually, no, mid to late 30s. We just started a family. So me and my wife, we just had our first boy. And I woke up one morning, and every guy in the morning you wake up and you have a little scratch down in the nether regions, get yourself ready for the day, basically, make sure everything's where it should be. And I just found a lump on one of my testicles. So rather than sort of sweating it and thinking, it might go down or whatever, I just went straight into the see the doctor straight away. Turned out to be the best decision I've ever made. And weirdly, I do attribute that decision to BMX as well. I think with BMX, you kind of learn not to be worried about facing your fear and just face your fear. And if you do face it, you'll either know if it's something to be scared of, or you'll know that it's not something to be scared of. So facing that, asking that question is important. So that's what I took from that. I think that was, something that kind of came from BMX. Found this lump literally straight into the doctor straight away. And within 48 hours, I guess, I was on the operating theatre table having it removed. So, it was a very, very quick thing from literally me waking up. So, a real thunderbolt out of the blue. Suddenly, you go in and, from one day being fine, the next day it's, you've got cancer and you're going in to be operated on, and it's going to be done in 2 days' time. So there's a lot going through your head. But I went through the operation. As I say, it was a weird time. Me and my wife had just started a family. Came out of the operation and then got offered a choice. They sort of said, okay, you can go through some sort of intensive chemo treatment, or we can do this other sort of treatment whereby you're literally kind of monitored almost on a daily basis, so, CAT scans and bloods and all sorts of stuff like that. Literally every other day I was going into the hospital to do stuff. And we knew we wanted to have more kids, so, chemo can kind of affect that. So I just sort of said, right, well, let's take that option. It's not for everybody, because I think, if you do have chemotherapy, then it essentially will blast it out of your system. It will kind of, you'll know pretty quick if you've won the battle. So the other route is a little bit more of a gamble. But we kind of took it and just thought, I'm still fairly young. We still want to have a nice family and still lots of stuff we want to do. So that was it. The kind of finding out and the operation side of it just went really quick like that. And then I had 5 years afterwards of what they call surveillance. So, year one, I was doing CAT scans and I was doing bloods and all on a weekly basis, almost daily basis, basically. So literally you're at the hospital all the time. And then year two, that gets a little bit less. And then you do that for 5 years, and at the end of the 5 years, it's gone down and down and down, and they eventually say, "Yeah, we think you're clear," basically. And thankfully, that's what happened to me. I kind of went through those 5 years, kind of, trying not to look over my shoulder too much, trying to look forwards and kind of, just keep going, really. And yeah, got through it, and they kind of said, "That's it. You're free to go. You're off into the world." And I guess, that plays a big part in why I'm riding again, I guess. But it wasn't like a thunderbolt, it wasn't like a lightning flash and I have seen a light type of moment, because there was a creeping doubt for years that something was missing for me. I was getting towards 40, and I sort of felt a bit over, a bit washed up, and a bit, I don't know, just kind of not the person I wanted to be. And I think, eventually when I got back on my bike, I kind of reconnected with who I want to be and who I enjoy being, really.
Definitely. And I think, the battle that you faced there is super unfortunate, but it teaches you so much about life, right? And especially the fact that you went in so quickly to get that dealt with, right? There's a lot of people that just kind of brush it off and they're like, "No, I'm fine." And it ends up kind of going for the worst, right? Like your situation could have gone so different, but yeah, it's great.
I think particularly, as I say, we'll talk about the demographic of Ride On in a bit, but guys of my age bracket, I would say 35 up to my age bracket, I'm not far off 50 now, but we're terrible for kind of denying things or trying to brush stuff under the carpet, or, maybe just sort of forget about it for now, or, trying to sort of ignore things, then they might go away. And I would say to anybody, don't do that. Face it. Face it like you're dropping in off a quarter pipe, or, you're about to hit a ledge. Just go and face it. And if there's something worrying you, you want to find out, go and face it.
Yeah, that's basically just the only thing you can do, right? Like, it's got to be dealt with. So, yeah, you just got to go and do it. Anyways, does your family have any kind of history with cancer at all? I know sometimes that can kind of play into it.
Yeah, no, not at all. No, nobody. I don't
Weird.
think so. So it was a real, out of the blue. Nothing in our family. There's no history, put it that way. So yeah, it was a weird one, a real weird one. Hard to know. It was hard to know what to think about it, because there's no one in the family to talk to, or I remember ringing my mom up and telling her that was the hardest part. She was obviously really upset, but yeah, but as I say, we kind of came through it, and it certainly influences my life today, put it that way. We live we live in a beautiful part of the country now, somewhere we always dreamed of living, and we just kind of took a call after it and said, the things that we talk about doing and dream about doing, we're gonna actually do them. We're gonna actually try and do these things. And that's the same with riding as well. I start, the way I approach riding now is that, rather than sort of thinking, "Oh, it'd be nice to try that line," or "It'd be nice to sort of hit that," but I'm 48, maybe I shouldn't do it, maybe I'm too old. No, I'm not. I'm gonna try and hit it. If I want to try and hit it, I'm gonna try and hit it now. And that's as I say, maybe prior to that I wouldn't have. Maybe if it not have happened, if I hadn't got cancer, I might not even be back on the bike. So I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. I think when it comes to when you're getting older, right, that's something that a lot of people will kind of use as an excuse on why they're not going to do something. And, I personally feel, and I've had plenty of influences that have kind of showed me that it's not that way, that realistically you can do all of this stuff as long as you just keep doing it. It's really when you start to see the decay of your own body where it doesn't want to hold up to that stuff is when you stop doing it, right? And yeah, that's kind of any age, right? Like, it's realistically just how it goes. I guess when you're older, you're more susceptible to it. But dude, I know a 60-year-old dude who still races every Tuesday. Like, there's plenty of time out there. It's just, once you get a little too old, I guess you're done. But I don't know, man.
I think it's easy to tell yourself you're over. You're done. It's the easiest thing in the world to say that, isn't it? So yeah, I've had my time. I'm getting a bit old now. This hurts, or I can't find the time, or I'm too busy with work, or whatever it is. There's a million reasons that people can find fine not to keep riding, but I think if it's inside you and you want to do it, and and you feel and it makes you feel good, then do it and keep doing it, and don't listen to those doubts in your body or in your mind. Just keep doing what makes you happy.
Definitely. Anyways, after you kind of had your battle with cancer, you really decided to get back on the bike. And when you started, I know that we had kind of touched on this earlier, that you couldn't really find anybody that was your age online. It was all basically just people showing off their bikes, and you really just wanted to find somebody to ride. But, why do you think it's so important that we make a community for these older riders?
Well, I mean, I think just the fact that there is a community out there is it's a great thing. You go to any park in the world, there'll be an older guy there, as part of that scene. He might be there once a week, or he might be there and he might be riding with his kids, or he might be a guy sort of in his early 30s. But there's older riders at every park, every scene, and I just thought, so it'd be nice to bring them together in some way. That was kind of like the sort of genesis of Ride On, really. We're just somewhere to kind of, for these guys to connect, particularly if, let's say you're a rider and you've had a bit of time away like I did, and you're going to come back to the sport. It's hard to go into your local scene and, let's say you're just kind of building your confidence again. You're just getting used to maybe just doing a 50-50, maybe just a stall. And there's a kid who's 16 doing flips over your head and stuff like that, So I think to be able to give riders of lots of different abilities just kind of a place to come together, particularly sort of an older generation, was kind of the nucleus of the idea, really. And Facebook was perfect for it. Facebook was really a good vehicle, really, to kind of hang it on, because people can kind of post up videos and photos, and they can stoke people and stuff like that. And a lot of these guys, a lot of the riders that are in that sort of bracket, late 40s, early 50s, some of them have been through it all, through every stage of BMX. Some of them have been through it all, and they're not pro riders or household names, but they've been there throughout the entire story of BMX. They might have bought a frame every 2 years, maybe every 3 years, I don't know. But they've supported the industry over decades, And I think they're very important. I think the older riders are really important. I think as a sport, I'm not sure. I think sometimes older riders are seen as like a novelty act. Do you know what I mean? Because the tricks that a lot of the older guys do, we were talking about my tricks earlier on, they are a little bit different. They're not seen as much. And I think sometimes it can be seen as like a sideshow or, as I say, novelty island type stuff. But, I think within the sort of whole family of BMX, they have a place. They are, they're part of BMX. They've been part of BMX for decades. So I think the older scene is something to be celebrated. If you look at how other sports do it better than BMX, sadly. That's not to say, I wouldn't ever run the industry down. I wouldn't run the media down in BMX. But other sports do it better than us. There's no doubt about it. If you look at like Masters series, most sports have Masters series, don't they? Sort of golf, your football Masters, all sorts of different stuff like that. And it's not sort of a sideshow as well. It's part of the main event. It's just a different class. So, as I say, I do think the older riders are important. They've been there for the journey, through the thick and the thin, and some of the great times, some of the lean times. So yes, creating Ride On as a community to bring those guys together was, an idea that I had. I originally thought if I get 300 members, that'll be cool. And today we've got like over 7,000 from every corner of the globe. So yeah, I'm stoked with it.
Definitely, man. I gotta say, I feel like I'm probably the youngest member in there at the age of 24, but I'm really in there just.
I remember, man.
There you go. And I'm pretty much in there because I can vouch for these people, and I have such a love for the older community when it comes to riders. Even as a kid, I would hang out with kids that were 3-4 grades ahead of me. And it's just been one of those things, right? I've always kind of looked towards the older community just to really see these lessons and whatnot that they go through. And when it comes to riding, it's definitely a big thing, right? Like some of my best sessions that I've ever had have been with people that are older that have been riding for years, right? Because just the stories that they have and, you know, the knowledge that they have when it comes to BMX is awesome. And I love it, man. It's such a great thing to be a part of, you know?
Well, I mean, that's good to hear, and you know, I'm really stoked and honoured that you've got me on the show and you want to talk about the older scene, because I know for a fact from listening to your some of your other shows, I know that I'm as old as your dad. So you know, you've definitely got the older generation on the show today, man. You know.
Yeah, definitely, man. I might even go as far to say as he might be, you know, a year or two younger than you. But
yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
maybe
who knows?
yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I think it is important that, you know, as a sport, we kind of celebrate the older part of it, and as I say, importantly, that it's not seen as a kind of a novelty or a freak show. It's just seen as, you know, a part of the scene. And I think, to be honest with you, I think by and large that is the case. You know, I mean, I ride now in a scene where there's loads of different ages, you know, within the kind of crew that I generally ride with. You know, all gravitates around a shop called Dead Sailor, which is one of the core shops in England. But, you know, you've got guys who are 18, guys in the 20s, guys in the 30s, guys in the 40s. Everybody gets on, you know, everybody feels part of the same scene, the same vibe. So, you know, by and large, I think it happens naturally. I think the, you know, BMX kind of unifies people, whatever their age. I do think, you know, one of the things with the way that BMX media is now, it's, you know, it's moved away from print, obviously. I think when print was kind of dying, I think I was really sort of heartbroken. I love a magazine. I like to sit there and read a magazine and, you know, and pore over it and read it twice, or, you know, look at all the different details in it. But I think what nobody realised is what the sort of opportunities coming out of the deaf of print for the really rich kind of media, like podcasts like this is a great example, you know, where you can really get into much more depth and, you know, have a much richer experience. But I think the sort of online sites, what's tended to happen is that because, you know, BMX is kind of the mainstay of the BMX market is probably going to be guys, I would think 20 to 30, I'm guessing. I mean, and that's where the majority of frames are going to be purchased. So obviously, you know, the media sites really need to cater to that, which they do. However, what I think has been lost along the way, you know, back in the day when you used to get a magazine, you would get scene checks, you would get interviews with up and comers, new riders, stuff like that, older riders. There was much more of a wider sort of set of faces, I think, in the media when it was print, because for one reason they had to fill the pages. So, you know, the contest report's only going to last 4 pages, so they had to fill those pages. So I think that encouraged them to, you know, spread that net a little bit wider and you know, have a bit of broader coverage, which is weird because back in the day we used to kind of really hate the magazines, you know, and slag them off for kind of being a little bit too narrow-minded. But in hindsight, I think they did a really good job. Whereas I think digital media tends to be very much focused on the superstars, if you know what I mean. You know, the superstars and the super brands. You see a lot of that because it's, you know, I guess it's what that mainstay that we spoke about, that 20 to 30 bracket. That's kind of what they're going to want to consume, I guess. But it would be nice to kind of get a little bit more of the, you know, as I said, there are lots of older riders out there. You know, we Ride On Now, we've got our website where we sort of do interviews and we try and shine the spotlight on them. And I'd love to see a few of the other media outlets, just the digital media outlets. I'd love to see them follow suit a little bit, really.
Definitely. It's an interesting topic, right? The fact that BMX media in the last few years is, like you said, really focused on these superstars, the guys that are up at the top of the game when there's so many other dudes out there, right? Like, don't get me wrong, man. I love Brad Sims and everything that he's been doing. He's unreal, and he absolutely deserves everything that he's been getting lately. But, you know, I don't want to just see his clips all the time. I want to see other people. You know, there's a lot of other guys out there that are shredding, that are killing it, man. And these guys deserve just as much praise, right? Like, it's one of those things that I guess at the end of the day, BMX media outlets are in it for, you know, a reason or two. And one of the reasons is definitely money, right? Like, it's a business just like anything else, right? So
yeah, I mean, I'm old and wise enough to know that, yeah, it's a business at the end of the day. They've got to keep the lights on, you know, and as I say, that mainstay of BMX, that 20 to 30 bracket, perhaps they're not that interested in what, you know, some 48-year-old guy's been doing or whatever. And I suppose that's cool. You know, I mean, that I guess that is cool. But I think if you're going to be the media, you're going to be the face of a sport, then, you know, it needs to include all that community, really, to be a true face of a sport, I think.
Definitely. And, you know, while we're on the topic here, why don't you just tell us, you know, what do you think mainstream BMX media companies or just mainstream BMX companies in general should be doing to kind of pay homage to these older riders? It's very common where we see, you know, guys that are some of the top pros who have given, you know, so much of their life to these companies. You know, they've done these insane things in these video parts and, you know, just to promote these brands. By the time that they turn 35, it's, you know, hey man, I'm sorry, but we got to cut you loose. There's newer guys and you just know how it is. I feel like there's a way around that and we just need to figure out how to do it.
I think it's a really difficult one. I think it's really difficult because, I mean, I'm realistic about it. You know, I know that, you know, these brands they've got to move product. I mean, I guess if anybody, you know, any young rider who's, let's say, in their early 20s, if they're given a chance to ride for a company, you know, they're going to take it, aren't they? They're going to take a deal. You know, who wouldn't? You know, free products, you know, photos, video parts, all that sort of stuff. You kind of take it. And I think, you know, if you do get offered those opportunities, it's great. But I guess if you're there long enough that the brand becomes so deeply associated with you, then that brand perhaps owes you a debt, you know, even when you're not riding them. But having said that, you know, it's difficult, isn't it? Because it's, you know, it's BMX at the end of the day. It's not Formula One. There's not, you know, there's only a limited amount of money, isn't there, to kind of keep everybody going. So if you're trying to sort of keep, you know, financially, if you're trying to keep a team of pros going and sort of pay off, let's say, or keep payments going to ex-pros, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, if I'm honest with you. And I think it's a really, really difficult question. I mean, maybe there's some way to keep these guys in the spotlight, you know, for longer in different ways, you know, to keep that light on them. But I think more than the bike companies, because I think the bike companies, in the mainstay, they're always supporting riders, even if a rider's been with them for years and you know, that rider's reached a point where maybe they don't ride as much or they're going, you know, it's time to move on. That company, if they want to keep selling frames, has got to then sponsor the new generation. I just think it's a natural churn. I think I would sort of point the finger a little bit more aggressively at the energy drinks companies, if I'm honest with you, because they certainly will pick up on whoever's hot, chuck a load of money at them, it would seem. Well, not a load of money compared to what they're making, we should point out. You know, I mean, Red Bull, they've sort of, you know, they've sort of used BMX media for a long time, sponsored clips and done this, but, you know, for the amount of exposure they get, you know, compared to what they've spent on it, it's been like a gold rush for them. You know, Red Bull have got, what, a football team and a Formula One team. You know, that tells you how much money they're making out of fizzy-coloured water, basically. I think they're the companies who really should be rewarding the riders a little bit more. And I hope that they're going to stick around. I hope that all those energy drink companies are involved with BMX for a long term and that they're going to keep that support going. It's not just about, you know, maximising impact or maximising hits or stuff like that. And you know, moving on when something else that gets more clicks comes along. Which, you know, the cynic inside me fears that might be the case. But yeah, I mean, as I say, for BMX companies, I think it's more challenging. And I don't know what the answer is. As I say, I think rather than the companies, you know, rather than me saying, I think the companies need to look after riders that have been with them for a long term more. I think BMX in general needs to just look after those riders, really. You know, as a community, we need to make sure that we kind of really treasure those people who've kind of really put the miles in, you know, for certain brands and have moved riding on, you know, to celebrate them and to keep celebrating them. You know, maybe sort of like a Hall of Fame or something like that. I don't know what the answer is, but I think that would be a better way to kind of, you know, because let's face it, at the end of the day, you know, the whole of the BMX community turn around to someone and saying, mate, you have been there and you've done it and you've made BMX what it is today for people like me, is probably worth more to that person than, you know, let's say a $500 check or whatever.
Definitely. And I think yeah, man, it's really difficult, especially when you get into these energy drink companies. You know, we just saw Rockstar drop Ryan Nyquist, which makes zero sense to me. The guy has been riding for them for so long, right? Like, yeah, it definitely doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's harsh. I mean, it's harsh. I mean, as I say, I understand what they're doing from a business point of view, but it is cynical. You know, they get in and they get these riders at the best. I mean, maybe one thing that you could say is, look, you know, some of these top riders that these energy drink companies are picking up, maybe they need to cut a more aggressive deal, or even get an agent involved who's going to say, okay, well, yeah, you can sponsor this guy now, but are you still going to, you know, can we lock you into for a 15-year contract or for a 20-year contract? And I'm guessing that most of these energy drink companies are there for, you know, 12-month contracts that they'll roll and then re-sign. So, you know, maybe as a sport and the people who represent the riders, maybe we need to play hardball a little bit more and not sell our sport away too easily on 12 month and, you know, 2-year deals. Maybe we want to ask for a little bit more of these guys.
Yeah, definitely, man. And I think that a great example of that is when riders get into bad injuries, right? Where, you know, things are really taken from them because, like, you see it all the time where these guys end up in a bad crash and, you know, they've got to deal with this stuff. And all of a sudden, all of these companies just drop them, right? And they say basically that they have no hope that they'll return, which is pretty fucked up in my opinion. It's
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, they become, you know, at that point, they become faceless corporates, don't they? You know, literally, you know, nobody there, nobody cares. If you're not out showing for them, then, you know, they'll walk away and drop you like a bad habit. So, I mean, as I say, you know, I think, you know, I don't know how these guys work out these deals with these companies, but, you know, my gut feeling would be to be more aggressive and to ask for longer deals and to ask for contingency and to lock all that in there and say, well, if I become injured, you know, I might have helped you sell, you know, your energy drink around the world. You know, I might have, my clip might have gone viral, but, you know, what are you going to do for me in 10 years time? And to get that locked in the contract might be, you know, might be something to think about.
Definitely. And I guess if there's one piece of advice that we could give right now, it's most likely that if you are going to get sponsored by a big brand or a big corporate company and they want to give you some sort of crazy deal, get a fucking lawyer, dude. Get someone who's going to get you the best deal that you can, because like, it's just one of those things that as BMX riders, it's no offense to anybody, but we don't know shit when it comes to running a big corporate company, right? These guys are buying into you because you're going to sell them product. You should know your worth before you give it up for too cheap, essentially.
Absolutely. I mean, the energy drinks industry has really milked BMX, I think, you know, and I don't know. I mean, it's difficult because, you know, just going back to what we were saying earlier on, if you're a 20-year-old kid and somebody comes up with a check and, you know, that check's going to pay for you to fly around the world or to ride whatever, you know, whatever contest you want, and it's going to increase your exposure, it's very hard for that person to say no. So I don't know, maybe better representation is what's needed.
Definitely. And I don't have anything against these companies that are doing this, just to kind of clear that up. I definitely think that it's some of the stuff that we've been given due to Red Bull. Like, look at some of the contests Red Bull has held over the years, right? And look at all of these riders that we've been really gaining because of this, right? Like, they definitely offer something that's very important to BMX. And, if, let's say, a company wanted to come and sponsor my show and do like a 2-year deal, I would absolutely take it if the price was right and everything was right. It's just something that, obviously you both have something to offer, but my thing is I just hate to see companies that take advantage of these riders that have so much to offer and only give them, a quarter or an eighth of that,
Yeah. As I say, it's a difficult one, tough question to wrestle with because, as I say, most riders, because we are, as big as BMX is now, we're still a niche sport. We're not basketball, we're not soccer, football, anything like that. So, we don't have that infrastructure to look after the stars, of the sport. So, and I also think, most kids just want to ride. That's all they want to do. They want to ride. So, if somebody waves a check in front of them, that they look at it and say, well, I don't have to take that job. I can just keep riding. It's I can see how it works, but I think it's been exploited a little bit by some of the brands. They just need to look after people a little bit better.
Definitely. Moving on from that, we'll do one more thing about Ride On, and then we'll move on to kind of the future and what you've got planned. So, what have been a few of your favorite events or jams or just pretty much anything that you've been able to do with Ride On? I know that you guys did, the 3 feet and rising jams and whatnot, and there's a lot of really cool stuff you guys have been able to do, but yeah, just tell us a little bit about it.
I mean, we do, obviously at the moment with COVID, we're kind of, we've mothballed everything. So there's nothing really going on. But normally, throughout the year, we'll do 6 to 8 events. So we'll take over an entire skate park. It's going to be BMX only. It's going to be over 30s only. So, it's just a Ride On crowd, really. And we've done some amazing evenings, we've had over 100 riders at some of them, a lot of those guys in their 40s as well. So it's just great to see that many people turn up and have a good time and, reconnect with each other or connect with each other. So, I would say there's nothing specific that stands out, but just the whole process of putting these events on and seeing people turn up and have a good time. And, that after the event, everybody's got something out of it, whatever level their riding's at, they might have pushed themselves, or someone might have said, you can do that, you can try that, and show them something new. The feedback that I get on the group is, people really get a buzz out of it. So that's just, that's its own reward, just to know that people are kind of getting out of these events what we wanted, really. I mean, I think we do the weekenders. We do a little sort of road trips up to Scotland and go to the skate parks up there. That's super rad. At the end of the year, we also do a jam called 3 Feet High and Rising, where we have we take over a skate park in Nottingham, which is the reason it's there is because it's pretty central in the country. So we want everybody to get there. And we'll run events, and we'll kind of do what you would call normal events. So we'll have a street comp, and we might have a bowl comp, and we might have a jump box comp. But then we'll do something a bit stupid as well, because I think one of the things that BMX does need to remember is how to be silly, and how to kind of have fun and to be stupid now and again, and not to be too self-conscious. So we do we did something called a Kickstart contest. Kickstart was a TV show that used to run here, and it was basically trials bike riders riding over tires and seesaws and shit like that, basically. So we built this little course, and it was like a time trial thing. And then we had a bowl comp where we had a spinning wheel, like the sort of thing you get in a casino that you spin and it goes around a ticker. And on each of the spurs, we wrote stupid things, basically. So before everybody's running the bowl comp, they had to each spin the wheel. And whatever it landed on, they had to do that trick in their run. And some of the tricks were like stupid, like, pose for a social media opportunity, or point at the other competitors to psych them out and stuff like that. So they were just stupid things that were really good fun. So that, yeah, those end of year events, the 3 feet higher and rising events, they have been high points as well. So, but it's just, it's just great to get people together and just to feel the vibe in the park, to know that people are pushing themselves, whatever age they are, to know that they're having a blast, that they're having a good time. That's its reward, really. That's kind of, that's the standout, really. Seeing people leave with smiles on their faces.
Definitely, man. And those events always are something that I think we need more of in BMX, right? Like I do my own jams and there's a lot of other people that do as well. And, I think you would agree that the more, the better, really. Like it just gets people really excited to ride. There's nothing better than going out and seeing a bunch of people who you might not have seen in quite a while that ride, you're kind of from the same community, but just different schedules and whatnot. But I feel like most people for a jam, they write off whatever they were supposed to do that day and they go, which is awesome.
I think so. And another thing about Ride On is that I guess our core audience is 40 to late 40s. I mean, looking at the demographics that we see on the page, we can tell how old people are, and that's pretty much where our core audience are. And that can be a funny age for men. You can get to a funny point in your life where you kind of, it can easily kind of start to get pretty dark for you, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So to give guys of that age group an event where everybody can come together and, as I say, they feel part of something, part of a scene, part of a crew, part of a community. It is really rewarding. But I mean, like you say, more jams of any kind, not just for the older dudes, more jams for everybody is a good thing. I mean, I would love to see a lot more jams happening. I think there's been a bit of a hefty pro focus in BMX recently, in terms of events, particularly with the Olympics now coming into play. Things feel like they've got pretty serious. I think, we can't lose sight of the fact that BMX can be silly sometimes. It can be stupid. It can be, pointless almost, if you know what I mean. Pointless in a good way, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And jams always bring that out. There's always something crazy goes on at a jam. So, more jams, just more jams in general, I think is a good thing for BMX. And, people listen to this, are thinking about organizing a jam, but not sure if it's going to be stressful or how to do it. Just get out there and do it, find out, go and do it.
Absolutely. And I guarantee, if you hit me up and you want to know about how to run your own jam, you've never done it before, I will give you everything that you need, man. We can talk on the phone, write down some notes, whatever you need. I'm down to make this community better, essentially. Yeah.
I think sometimes you've got to take that leap of faith, haven't you? And I mean, if you look at what you've done with the podcast, before you started the podcast, you said to me before, you knew nothing about running a podcast or AV, but you just took that leap and went for it and found out how to do things as you go. And that's the same with the jams. The first jam you put on, the first jam I put on, I had no idea what I was doing, but you kind of learn as you go. And if anything is BMX, that is BMX.
Absolutely. Yeah. BMX has taught me everything, and a lot of that is literally just that, if you want something, you just got to do it. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Definitely. So we are sitting at about 2 hours, 15 minutes right now. So, how do you feel about going to fan questions? And then we got one more for you. Is there anything that we kind of missed?
No. I think, I probably just should mention that, Ride On this year, we've got sponsored, which is fantastic. We were talking about the industry earlier on and the industry's approach to the older crowd. I was super stoked when Ian Morris at Four Down, also owns United, he put together a deal with S&M and Etnies to sponsor Ride On this year. And I was just so stoked that these, they're well-established brands. And the fact that they are, they see the older crowd as being something legitimate. They see it as something as, something that's not a novelty act. It's something worth putting their brands behind. and we're super stoked to have them on board. It means that we're going to be able to do events and, give out decent prizes and run decent competitions. We've already got a video contest up and running. So, yeah, super stoked by that. And I just wanted to give those two brands and also Ian a big shout out and a thank you.
Definitely, yeah, man. Those brands are really going to help out this year. And, a huge shout out to Ian for being so great about getting you guys those brands, Yeah, so if we could hop into some fan questions here. The first one comes in from Mike O'Connell. What is the best single trick video clip and why?
I do a lot of road trips with Mike O'Connell. So often we're sat in a car and, you talk about stuff for hours and hours and hours, don't you? So this is one thing that comes up all the time. Like you're going to do a 6-hour drive with somebody, you're going to get locked into a conversation like this. So whenever me and Mike are on a road trip or we're going somewhere, we always have this ongoing debate about the best single trick ever to be captured on video. And I don't even know. I couldn't even say what mine is. I know what his is, but I don't know. I have no idea really what mine would be. Probably it's probably something done by Jay Miron in the Schwinn American Muscle video. But other than that, I'd be hard pushed to name a single trick that I think is the best single trick on video ever.
Yeah, there's a lot of them in there, and one that comes to mind right away, and like this definitely isn't my pick, but it's one of the top ones, is Jay Miron on this bank to wall ride, and he goes back and into a double peg grind on this rail. Yeah, I think that's in the McNeil video, but dude,
yeah, that's awesome, that trick actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a bit of him in American Muscle, and it's not one single trick; it's the tricks that he puts back to back. Like he does a decade tire tap on one side, and then what does he do on the other side? Oh, there's an alley-oop, then an alley-oop nose wheelie over a hip. And then he goes into I think it's perfect 5 tap. And most of those tricks are the sort of tricks that most riders you wouldn't hit them in a run, because they're really hard tricks. So you might have been trying to kind of get them and get them and get them. So it might be just like single shot tricks, whereas he just strings these 3 together. And I just, I mean, for me, that's the greatest video section ever, but I couldn't give you my favorite trick. But I tell you, Mike O'Connell's is the 5 tap on the rail at the Baco Jam. I can't even remember who did it. Is it Reinstra who did it? Something like that?
Maybe. That might be right.
I think it is. But that's his favorite anyway.
Hell yeah. And then another one from Mike O'Connell. He's asking, what is your favorite, video section of all time? So kind of similar, but, single clip is a different thing than a whole video.
Yeah. I mean, I think I just touched on it there. I think Miron's section in American Muscle is probably one of my favorite sections. I've watched it time and time again, and he just has. And I know picking this video section makes me look really old and sort of throwbacky, because it's sort of an old section, but it is the sort of rider that has like the biggest stuff, but then also the most technical, the sort of finesse side of riding. So that power and that tech together at that level, I don't think it's really rare that you see it actually. As I say, the most technical tricks done so aggressively, at such speed or height. I don't think you see that often. And for me, that video section is just hands down. That's the one I can watch again and again and again. And every time I see it, I want to go out and ride.
Definitely. I love it, man. Another one here from Mike O'Connell. Do you find all the dirt and lack of bike maintenance helps your riding? Yeah. I'll just say yes to that, I think. Yeah. Oh, I love it, man. James White sent in, please tell us about your love for polishing old school BMXs.
Right. Well, yeah. I think I've spoke about this already, about how little time I have for all that. In fact, James is, I know James loves polishing and restoring old school BMXs, so I won't trash it too much because he's a good friend and I do have a lot of respect for him. But it's just not for me. I kind of, as I say, my memories of old school BMX bikes are just filled with kind of hate, really, I guess. Not hate, but, uh, those bikes cost me a lot of time and money, basically.
Yeah.
I remember working 2 summer jobs to buy an 87 Harrow Master. I worked literally every hour of the day trying to save up for it. I bought it and I snapped it in, I think, 4 months.
Oh my God.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, to this day, it's a beautiful bike. It was a beautiful bike, beautiful frame. But I don't get all misty-eyed when I think of old school BMX for those sort of reasons.
Yeah, fair enough. Another one here from James White. Do you have any memorabilia from your Dragonfly days?
Do you know what? I don't. I mean, I sold the bits that I had. No, I don't have anything. I don't I'm not one of those guys who keeps bikes and memorabilia and things like that. Really, I mean, I've got in here, it's my office. I've got a couple of signed photos. I've got a signed poster from Joe Kidd on a Stingray from Mark Eaton, and I've got a signed picture from Windy Osborne, and literally, I think that's all I've got in the kind of memorabilia kind of style. I just, I think when a bike's done and it's dead and you've rode it and it's knackered, then it can go and be ridden by some, it's either good for the tip, and throwing away, or if it's still good to ride, I'd rather somebody rode it. I'd rather sell it and let somebody ride it and get joy out of it and enjoy it for what it's meant to be used for, rather than, restoring it and taking it to events where other people who restore bikes go and just showing them to each other, which to me seems crazy.
Yeah, fair enough, man. This next one comes in from T77 BMX. How long have you been repping BSD parts? So we kind of covered that earlier. You were riding the Freedom for a little while.
And I must also say that Grant from BSD sponsored a few of the ride-on events a few years ago as well. He was really supportive. And I'm always a sort of person to put my money where my mouth is and try and support the brands that support the things that I care about. So, once you sponsored us, I just thought, well, I'm going to buy one of their frames and ride one of their frames. So I ended up riding a Passenger and then a Freedom. I mean, don't get me wrong, great bikes, absolutely loved them. I've got some BSD parts on. I've got their Substance cranks, which are amazing. And I run one of their Jones and seats as well, which is really cool. So I do think, Grant's a good friend of mine. He makes some fantastic parts as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The new BSD Free Coaster Hub looks insane, man. That thing looks incredible.
Yeah, everybody who's tried one says it's like no free coaster you've ever used. Because obviously, the thing with the free coaster, everybody's like, well, what's the dead spot like? What's the dead spot like? Apparently this is just like, a complete game changer. So
yeah,
I've not actually tried one, but I'm intrigued to do so. I think everybody who's kind of heard about them and everybody I speak to who's used one has just said, yeah, it's completely different.
Yeah, definitely, man. I've been considering moving over to Free Coaster from a Profile Elite hub. So, it's going to be quite the change. So I might go with a BSD one if possible.
Yeah.
Definitely.
They look good.
Yeah, so this last question comes in from SYC Matt. Can you please stop posting clips and photos of Rehab Park? It makes me sad.
Yeah, I think that kind of just shows what an important era and venue it was. I mean, as I said before, it created a scene, and this was just before Jamie made his big move to America and came over and started, competing in the X Games. And I think very much his time at that park, he would ride a vert ramp there a lot. He was very much in a phase where he's becoming the Jamie Bestwick that he was going to be, that he was destined to be. He was, at that time, there was no money. There was no future riding BMX, for as a career, as an athlete. So everybody at that park, we were just riding BMX because it was what we did. Whereas Jamie really still believed in it, and he kind of went and he approached it like an athlete. I think he would go and he would drill certain tricks and train certain tricks, and I once watched him having a whole session practicing riding in. He put everybody was riding 44/16 gears, and he'd come with like a 47/16 gearing. We were like, "What are you doing?" He says, I'm going to crank along the top so I can hit a trick on the first wall. And he spent the whole evening just practicing getting the cranks in and dropping in at speed. And, you know, it was kind of written that he was going to become what, you know, the dude he is today, the amazing rider he's become, because he always believed in it, and he always kind of committed himself to training really like an athlete would.
Absolutely, yeah. Jamie Bestwick is by far one of the best vert riders that's ever, you know, stepped on the pedals. Definitely, like he's just so good on a bike. You know, it's hard to match. That's for sure.
Yeah. You should get him on. He'd be a good guest.
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna try and make that happen. Anyways, you know, this is the last question of the show. I just want to say before we go, you know, thank you so much for doing this today. This has been a lot of fun. I really love to pick your brain just on the older riders and the community behind it, you know. But yeah, our last question today is, as someone who's created such a huge community, what's your advice to others out there who want to do the same?
Who want to create a sort of an online community, or
yeah,
I think my advice would be kind of in line with my advice on doing anything in and around BMX, really. In that, I think, you know, one of the things that you learn from BMX is at some point you can try and learn a trick, and you could try and find out what that trick involves, but at some point you've got to commit to it, and you've got to face it, and you've just got to ask that question, you know, can I do it or can't I, and go for it. And I think that applies with absolutely everything, whether you're going to do what you did and start a podcast show, or whether you're going to start an online community. You know, don't be scared of looking silly. Don't be scared of it not quite working out as you want it to do. First of all, just make that leap. You know, whatever you feel is needed in BMX, whether it's a new online community, or whether it's another podcast or a video show, whatever it is, or a jam, whatever you feel is missing, just make that leap and just make it happen. Because that's, you know, I spoke earlier on about BMX is really all about the riding, but it also needs people to kind of take those leaps and say, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do this event. We're going to do this company. We're going to do this podcast. We're going to do this zine. We're going to do this. And that's kind of what's driven it forward and always held it together. And it's also what makes you a good rider, you know, taking that leap. But as I say, that lesson of what you learn in BMX, you can apply that to lots of other parts of your life. So, yeah, whatever you want to do, take that leap of faith.
Definitely. I think that's some great advice, man. Thank you so much, Neil, for that. Yeah, before we go, obviously, you know, if you got anything you really want to shout out or anything, just let us know.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, if anybody's interested in, you know, checking out the website, it's rideon-bmx.com. So you can check us out and read lots of articles that we post on there. And obviously, you know, if you're a rider, if you're over 30, you want to connect with the Ride On Facebook group, then just put Ride On BMX into Facebook. It'll bring up the group, and you can just join from there.
Hell yeah. Thank you guys for joining us today. Neil, again, thank you so much for doing this. This has been a lot of fun. Yeah, we will see you in the next one. Peace.